My father lifted a white sign in front of my daughter at my sister's wedding entrance. Country Bumpkin was printed across it in black letters. "Wear it if you want to come in," he said, while my mother smiled toward the camera. Willa looked at the ring box she had restored for the bride. "I'm not wearing that." I handed the sign back and said, "Understood." They thought the board would keep her out of the family picture. They did not realize the camera had just turned their family tradition into a record. I hope you are doing well wherever you are listening. Stay with me, because what happened after we left that doorway changed what family meant to us. And subscribe so you do not miss the rest of our story. That morning, Willa changed her shoes twice. The first pair was brown leather, polished so carefully that I could see the kitchen light reflected in the toes. She stood in front of the hallway mirror, turned one foot to the side, then frowned. "Do these look too country?" I stopped fastening the small pearl buttons at the cuff of my dress. "They look like shoes." "That is not what I asked." Willa was 13, old enough to recognize when adults were judging her, and young enough to believe she might avoid it if she chose the right shoes. She disappeared into her room and returned wearing a pair of black flats Judith had given her at Christmas. She took 3 steps, looked at herself again, and shook her head. "Now I look like I'm trying too hard." I came up behind her and rested my hands on her shoulders. "You are going to a wedding, not taking an entrance exam." She gave me a thin smile. "Aunt Celeste treats every room like an entrance exam." I could not tell her she was wrong. Celeste had spent years learning how to make ordinary things sound embarrassing. My truck was not reliable. It was rustic. My work restoring old barns and timber homes was not skilled labor, it was quaint. Belmere was not where we had grown up. It was the place she had escaped. Still, the invitation on our kitchen counter had both our names printed in silver lettering. Audrey Rowan and Willa Rowan. I had checked it so many times that morning that I knew the spacing between the letters. "You were invited," I told her. "Your name is right there." Willa glanced toward the envelope. "So was there a mistake on the family page?" The wedding website included photographs of Celeste with our parents, Adrian, his family, and relatives I had not seen in years. Willa did not appear in a single image. Neither did I. Except at the far edge of a photograph taken before she came into my life. "I think they used older pictures," I said. It was an answer, but it was not a good one. Willa picked up the small wooden ring box she had spent 3 weekends restoring. She had found it in a box of damaged hardware at my workshop, replaced one hinge, sanded away the water stains, and lined the inside with a square of cream-colored fabric. Celeste had not asked for it. Willa had made it because she wanted to arrive with something that proved she cared. "Do you think she'll like this?" "She should. That means you don't know." "I know it is beautiful." Willa ran her thumb along the polished edge. "Grandma said I would have a special family moment today." 3 weeks earlier, Judith had called and asked for Willa's shoulder measurement. She claimed the family would wear matching ceremonial sashes during a brief segment for the wedding film. I had almost said no. Celeste disliked sentimental traditions unless they photographed well. Graham had never shown interest in ceremonial anything. But Judith sounded delighted that Willa would finally be included. I measured from one shoulder to the other, while Willa stood in our kitchen, and Judith waited on the phone. Looking back, that should have bothered me more than it did. At the time, I wanted to believe inclusion had finally become easier than exclusion. Willa changed back into the brown shoes. "I would rather look country than uncomfortable," she said. "That sounds like the right decision." The drive from Belmere to Ashbridge House took a little over an hour. October had turned the hills, copper and red, and the fields beyond the highway were lined with harvested corn. Willa watched the scenery while rehearsing what she planned to say to Adrian's parents. "Nice to meet you. Celeste has told us so much about you." She paused. "She has told us almost nothing about them. You don't have to give a speech. I don't want them thinking I have no manners. You have better manners than most adults I know. Most adults you know work in barns." I looked at her. She smiled. That was a joke. Good. I was deciding whether to make you walk the last 12 miles. Her laugh filled the car for a few seconds, and I let myself believe the day might be fine. Ashbridge House appeared beyond a stone wall and a row of old maples. The main building had been designed to resemble an English country estate, although half the timber beams were decorative. Valets directed cars beneath a covered entrance draped in pale flowers. Willa looked through the windshield. This is what Aunt Celeste thinks the country looks like when no one actually lives there. I nearly laughed, but something in her voice stopped me. The wedding theme appeared on a sign beside the entrance. From our roots to forever. Beneath the words were photographs of Celeste and Adrian as children. Celeste stood in front of our grandfather's barn, wearing a white dress she had refused to wear anywhere near the actual animals. Another picture showed her carrying a basket of apples she had not picked. She had built an entire wedding around the life she had spent years mocking. Inside the entrance hall, an attendant in a charcoal suit greeted us with a tablet. Name, please? Audrey Rowan. This is my daughter Willa. The attendant found my name immediately. His finger stopped moving across the screen. May I see your invitation? I opened my purse and handed it to him. He compared the card to the tablet. His expression changed, not dramatically, but enough for Willa to notice. Is something wrong? She asked. No. I just need to confirm one detail. He touched an icon, read something, then looked toward a side corridor. Miss Willa has been assigned to the family entrance segment. What does that mean? I asked. I'm going to ask Mr. Rowan to meet you. My father? Yes, ma'am. The attendant stepped away before I could ask anything else. Willa shifted the ring box from one hand to the other. Maybe it's the sash. Probably. I said it because she was looking at me. Graham appeared first. He wore a dark suit and the silver ties Celeste had chosen for the men in the family. Judith walked beside him in a pale blue dress, smiling with the careful excitement she usually reserved for photographs. There you are, she said. We were beginning to worry. We are 45 minutes early. Yes, but there is something special to do before you go in. Graham carried a thin, white-painted birch plywood sign against his leg. I could not read it until he turned it around. Country Bumpkin. The words were printed in thick black letters. A cream ribbon had been threaded through 2 holes at the top. For 1 second, I was not standing in Ashbridge House. I was 15 again, outside another club, with rainwater drying on my work boots and my father telling me not to embarrass my sister. Then Willa moved beside me, and the memory broke. What is that? She asked. Graham held the board toward her. It's an old family tradition. Judith touched the ribbon. You wear it for the camera. Everyone has a laugh, and then you can go inside. Willa looked from the sign to Judith. Does everyone wear one? It is different for each person, Judith said. Where are yours? Judith's smile tightened. Don't make this difficult. I looked at the ribbon again. The color was almost identical to the faded strip I had once hidden in a box and carried through 3 moves. My father had not simply thought of the same words. Someone had recreated the old sign. Why? I asked. Graham gave a small sigh, as though I were delaying a simple task. It is part of the wedding film. They have footage from when you were young. This connects the generations. You told me she was wearing a sash. Judith lowered her voice. I knew you would overthink it if I explained. Behind them, a camera operator stood near the flower display. The lens was already pointed toward us. Willa noticed it at the same moment I did. You're filming this. The operator glanced toward Graham. I was told this was the family entrance tradition. Before I could answer, heels struck the stone floor behind my parents. Celeste came toward us wearing a satin robe over her wedding dress. Her hair was pinned beneath a jeweled comb, and 2 bridesmaids followed several steps behind her. What is taking so long? She asked. Willa does not understand the joke, Judith said. Celeste looked at the sign, then at Willa. She just has to wear it for 30 seconds. No, Willa said. Celeste blinked. Excuse me? I'm not wearing that. It is for the film. I don't care. Graham's face hardened. You were invited to participate. If you refuse the family segment, you do not get to walk past it. Willa's fingers tightened around the ring box. So, I can only come in if I let you make fun of me? No one is making fun of you, Judith said. You are choosing to take it that way. I stepped between Willa and the sign. Why does she have to wear it to enter? Celeste looked over my shoulder at the arriving guests. Her expression changed from irritation to embarrassment, as though our presence had become something she needed to contain. All the guests are from high society, she said. An adopted girl shouldn't expect to be invited. For a moment, no one moved. The camera remained pointed at us. Willa looked down at the ring box she had restored for Celeste. Her thumb traced the smooth edge once, then stopped. I'm not wearing that, she repeated. Her voice did not shake. Graham held the sign toward me instead. Talk some sense into her. Judith leaned closer. Audrey, this is Celeste's wedding. Do not ruin it over one photograph. Willa turned to me. I can wait outside, she said quietly. You can go in. That was the moment something inside me became clear. My daughter believed there was a version of this day where I left her at the entrance and joined the people who had humiliated her. She believed it because somewhere along the way, I had taught her that keeping peace with my family was important enough to make that possible. I took the sign from Graham. For the briefest second, relief crossed Judith's face. Then I placed it back against my father's chest. Understood. Celeste frowned. What does that mean? It means we understand the invitation now. I took Willa's hand. Graham called after us. You are making a scene. I did not turn around. A scene required an audience and an argument. I gave them neither. We walked past the valet stand, past the stone wall, and back to my truck. The camera operator continued filming until we were outside the covered entrance. Willa climbed into the passenger seat without speaking. She placed the ring box on her lap and stared through the windshield. I drove away before anyone could reach us. 15 minutes later, she said, Can you stop somewhere? I pulled into the parking lot of a small diner that had already put pumpkins beside the front door. I turned off the engine. Willa looked down at the box. She never invited me, did she? She put your name on the invitation. That isn't what I asked. I gripped the steering wheel. I don't know yet. She nodded as if she had expected that answer. Would you have gone in without me? No. You didn't even think about it? No. Her shoulders loosened slightly, but not enough. My phone vibrated in the cup holder. Judith had called 6 times. Graham had left 2 messages. Celeste had sent one. You just embarrassed me in front of my staff. I turned the phone face down. A new message appeared from my cousin Rebecca. You need to see what they put in the wedding video. A link followed, along with a password. Willa looked at the screen. Is that the live stream? Yes. Are you going to open it? I hesitated. Then I set the phone against the dashboard and entered the password. The ballroom appeared on the screen. Celeste and Adrian stood near the front, but the ceremony had not begun. Guests faced a large display above the flower-covered platform. Music faded. The words, "From our roots to forever," appeared. Then Celeste's recorded voice filled the room. My family taught me never to judge anyone by where they came from. The image changed. Willa appeared on the ballroom screen, standing beside the country bumpkin sign. For 1 second, neither Willa nor I moved. On my phone, the ballroom screen showed the entrance to Ashbridge House from the camera operator's angle. Willa stood beside the white-painted wooden sign, the words, "Country Bumpkin," large enough to read from the back of the room. My father held the ribbon. My mother was smiling. The camera had captured everything. Graham saying it was a family tradition. Judith telling Willa she could enter after she wore it. Willa asking whether everyone had a sign. My own voice asking why. Then Celeste appeared on the screen in her satin robe. "All the guests are from high society," her recorded voice said through the ballroom speakers. "An adopted girl shouldn't expect to be invited." A sound moved through the room. It was not one clear reaction. It was dozens of people breathing, whispering, shifting in their chairs. Beside me, Willa's hand closed around the wooden ring box. "They played it," she said. I could not tell whether she sounded frightened or angry. On the live stream, the camera view changed to the ballroom. Celeste stood near the front beside Adrian. She had gone completely still. Then she moved. She stepped into the aisle and looked toward the back of the room, where the production controls must have been. "Stop!" she shouted. "Turn it off!" The screen did not go dark. Someone near the front turned toward her. Adrian said something I could not hear. Celeste pushed past the first row of chairs. The wedding film continued. Willa's image faded. A grainy line rolled across the ballroom screen, followed by the date 2001. My lungs stopped working for a moment. I knew the building before I recognized the people. It was the front entrance of the Allegheny Crest Club, where Celeste had attended a youth recognition ceremony when she was 10. The camera shook as whoever held it laughed. Then 15-year-old me stepped into the frame. I wore jeans with a patch at one knee, work boots, and the red flannel shirt I had borrowed from my grandfather after we repaired part of his barn roof. A white board hung from a ribbon around my neck. "Country Bumpkin." Willa turned from the phone and looked at me. I could not look back. On the screen, young Celeste stood beside me in a white dress and polished shoes. Her hair was curled. She held a certificate against her chest. My father's voice came from behind the camera. "Stand closer to your sister, Audrey." The girl I had been did not move. Graham repeated himself. When I finally stepped nearer, Celeste looked at the sign and laughed. "She makes me look better." Several adults laughed with her. I remembered that sound. For years, I had told myself there had only been 3 or 4 people nearby. The old recording showed at least a dozen. My father said, "Every successful girl needs someone to show people what she escaped from." Young Celeste smiled at the camera. The girl wearing the sign looked down. Judith's voice came next. "Audrey, smile. People will think we are cruel if you stand there looking miserable." The ballroom screen went black. A second later, the live stream audio disappeared. The video window froze on the Ashbridge House logo, then displayed a message saying the broadcast had ended. Willa stared at the blank screen. "That was you." It was not a question. "Yes, they made you wear it." I looked through the windshield at the pumpkins outside the diner. One had been painted white and given a smiling face. It was complicated. The words left my mouth before I understood what I had said. Willa's eyes narrowed. No, it wasn't. She was right. I heard Judith's voice inside my answer. It was complicated. It was a different time. Everyone laughed. Your father meant well. Celeste was only a child. Those phrases had protected the people who made the sign. They had never protected the girl wearing it. I turned toward Willa. "No," I said. "It wasn't complicated. They made me wear it." "Why?" Celeste had been invited to that club because of a school program. Dad thought I looked wrong for the event. "So? He put a sign on you?" "Yes." "And Grandma filmed it?" "Yes." Willa placed the ring box on the dashboard. "Did you say no?" "I did at first." "What happened?" I rubbed my thumb against the side of the steering wheel. Dad said I was jealous of Celeste. Mom said I was trying to ruin her opportunity. They told me if I wore it for a few minutes, everyone would laugh, and the problem would be over. "Did you laugh?" I smiled because Mom told me to. Willa looked at the phone again. "They kept the video." I didn't know they still had it. They thought it was funny enough to save for 25 years. I had no answer. 20 minutes after the live stream ended, my phone vibrated again. This time the name on the screen was Lena Park. I had met her once during a planning lunch. Celeste insisted I attend. Lena owned the production company filming the wedding. I answered and put the call on speaker. Miss Rowan? Yes. This is Lena Park from Park Frame Studio. Are you somewhere safe to talk? I'm with Willa. There was a pause. Is she all right? Willa gave a short, humorless laugh. No, I said. She isn't. I understand. I am calling because I need to tell you we have stopped the live stream and preserved all production files related to the entrance segment. Why did you put that footage in the wedding film? We were given a written production brief describing it as a consensual family tradition. The older sequence was already in the program. A short clip from today was inserted into the marked entrance slot. You heard her refuse. I did not hear the live audio before the clip entered the playback queue. One operator was filming at the entrance, and another assistant received the marked take. That does not excuse what happened. We should have verified consent before using footage of a minor. Willa leaned closer to the phone. Who said my mom agreed? Lena hesitated. The written materials came through the bride's family. I am not going to name individuals until I have reviewed the exact documents. My mother never signed anything, Willa said. I understand. No, Willa replied. You understand now. Lena went silent. I put my hand near Willa's, but I did not touch her. What happens to the footage? I asked. For now, nothing is being released. The master files are locked. I have told my team not to send copies. Because the live stream was private but accessible to invited guests, I cannot promise no one recorded their screen. Willa's jaw tightened. I don't want people posting me. I will document that request, Lena said. Your mother will need to make the formal decision as your legal parent, but I will not treat your wishes as irrelevant. I looked at Willa. We are not releasing it, I said. Willa nodded once. Lena continued. The ceremony has been paused. No vows were completed. Mr. Ashford has asked that nothing resume until he understands what happened. That was the first thing I learned about the ballroom after the live stream ended. Did Celeste know the old tape was in the program? I asked. She approved a shortened preview of the family history section. I need to compare that preview with the version that played. The tape your mother supplied contained more footage than the marked excerpt. My mother supplied it. Yes. Willa closed her eyes. Lena said, Miss Rowan, I am sorry. I did not know what to do with the apology. Preserve everything, I said. The raw entrance footage, the old tape, the instructions, every version. I already have. Do not send the footage to Celeste. The contract is in her name, so I cannot make permanent decisions without legal review, but no files will leave our system tonight. Put that in writing. I will. After the call ended, Willa picked up the ring box and turned it over in her hands. Did Grandma know that old part would play? I almost answered that she had supplied the tape, then stopped. Willa was asking whether Judith had known how much of it would be shown. I don't know, I said. I only know she gave them the recording. Willa looked out the window. My phone displayed another incoming call. Adrian. I considered letting it go to voicemail, then answered without using speaker. Audrey, he said. His voice was lower than usual. Are you with Willa? Yes. Is she safe? She is away from your wedding. He took a breath. The ceremony is stopped, Lena told me. I need to understand whether you knew that video was going to play. No. Did you give anyone permission to film Willa wearing that sign? No. Did you approve a family tradition segment? No. There was silence on his end. In the background, I heard a door shut. Celeste says your father came up with the sign this morning, he said. That sign copied one they made me wear in 2001. I saw. She knew Willa was being stopped at the entrance. I saw that too. Then what are you asking me? I am trying to separate what was planned from what went wrong. The question made my fingers tighten around the phone. My daughter was invited to a wedding, blocked at the door, told she had to wear a sign to enter, and insulted because she was adopted. That was not something that went wrong with a video. The video showed what your fiancé said. I know. Do you? He did not answer immediately. I have postponed the ceremony, he said. Postponed. I am not making a permanent decision in a ballroom full of guests. I looked at Willa. She was tracing the repaired hinge of the ring box. That is your decision, I said. I also need you to know your father is telling people this was a tradition you participated in willingly. I was 15. He says you laughed. My mother told me to smile. Another pause. I heard that on the tape, he said. Then you have your answer. I ended the call. Willa looked at me. Is he still marrying her? I don't know. Does he believe her? I don't know that either. She nodded, but I could see that every unknown answer was becoming another weight she carried. My phone filled with messages. Judith wrote that the video had humiliated the family. Graham wrote that I needed to tell Adrian I had always understood the joke. Celeste wrote 3 times. The first message accused Lena of using the wrong edit. The second accused me of arranging the livestream leak. The third read, "You could have prevented this by making Willa cooperate for 30 seconds. I showed Willa none of them. I took screenshots, saved the messages, and sent Celeste one reply. I did not provide the old footage. I did not approve the wedding segment. I did not consent to Willa being filmed for humiliation. Do not contact her directly." Celeste answered before I could put the phone down. "You are using a child to punish me for our childhood." I turned the phone off. Willa watched me. What did she say? That this is my fault. Because I wouldn't wear it? Because she needs someone else to be responsible. Willa stared down at the ring box. I made this for her. I know. I thought if she liked something I made, maybe she would stop acting like I wasn't really related to her. The sentence hurt more than Celeste's words at the entrance. I wanted to tell Willa she had never needed to earn her place. But I had brought her to a family that required proof, performance, and silence. I had allowed Judith's project comments to pass because she said them with a smile. I had ignored the way Graham introduced Willa as the girl Audrey adopted, instead of his granddaughter. I had accepted Celeste leaving Willa out of photographs because I did not want to start an argument at every holiday. Each incident had seemed too small to justify ending contact. Together, they had built the doorway we had walked into that morning. We drove home after sunset. The ring box stayed in Willa's lap for the entire ride. When we reached the house, she carried it to her room. I heard a drawer open and close. I waited in the kitchen, expecting her to come back. She did 10 minutes later, wearing sweatpants and an old t-shirt from my workshop. She poured herself a glass of water and stood across the counter from me. I need to ask you something. All right. Did Grandpa ever apologize for making you wear that sign? No. Did Grandma? No. Did Aunt Celeste? She was 10. That is not an answer. No, I said. She never apologized. Willa put down the glass. Did they ever say it was wrong? No. Then what made you think they wouldn't do it again? I opened my mouth. Nothing I could say sounded honest enough. They had behaved better. I had learned when to leave. I thought I could protect her. I believed people became less cruel when there was a child watching. Every explanation placed the responsibility on my ability to manage them instead of their refusal to change. Willa looked at me for a long moment. They did it to you, she said, and you still brought me there. This time it was not a question. It was the truth I had spent years avoiding. The next morning, Willa made breakfast before I came downstairs. She had already washed the pan, wiped the counter, and packed her own lunch even though it was Sunday and she had nowhere to go. Are you hungry? She asked. Her voice was polite in a way that frightened me. She did not call me Mom. She did not complain that I had bought the wrong cereal. She did not ask whether I wanted the last piece of toast. She moved around the kitchen like a guest who wanted to leave no evidence she had been there. I had seen that version of Willa before. During the first months she lived with me, She folded her blankets every morning and kept her belongings inside one plastic storage bin. Even after I bought her a dresser, she refused to use the bottom 2 drawers. When I asked why, she said it was easier to move if nothing spread out. It had taken almost a year before she left shoes in the hallway without lining them against the wall. Now her shoes were placed beneath the bench, with the toes perfectly even. "Willa," I said, "we should talk about last night." She rinsed her glass. "We already did." "Not enough." She dried the glass and placed it in the cabinet. "I know Grandpa made you wear the sign first. I know Grandma filmed it. I know Aunt Celeste never apologized. I need to apologize." Willa closed the cabinet. "I am sorry I brought you there. I thought I could manage them. I thought if anything happened, I could take you away." "You did take me away." The answer sounded generous, but her face was blank. "I should never have put you in that position." She looked toward the kitchen window. "But you did." "I know." "Why?" I had spent half the night preparing explanations. None of them sounded acceptable in daylight. They had been behaving better. Better than what? Better than when I was young. That isn't the same as good. No. You kept saying we could leave if they made things uncomfortable. I did. Why did I have to go somewhere you expected to become uncomfortable? I sat at the table because my legs no longer felt steady. I believed knowing what they were like gave me control. Willa leaned against the counter. "They were manageable for you." "I thought they were." Being manageable does not make someone safe. The sentence was simple. That made it harder to avoid. I nodded. "You are right." She picked up her lunch bag. "Where are you going?" "To the workshop." "It is Sunday." "I know. You do not have to work. I want to fix the loose handle on the small tool chest." "I can help. I want to do it alone." She walked past me, took her coat from the hook, and left through the back door that connected the house to the workshop yard. I let her go. Following her would have been another way of asking her to make me feel forgiven. My phone had been charging in the living room. When I turned it on, 43 messages appeared. Most came from relatives who had not spoken to me in years. My Aunt Deborah wrote that Celeste had always dreamed of a perfect wedding, and that I should consider how devastating public humiliation could be. A cousin I barely remembered said Willa should have worn the sign for 30 seconds and laughed. Another relative said the sign was cruel, but asked whether I could explain that Celeste had not meant the adoption comment literally. The stories did not match. The stories contradicted one another. Some blamed Graham, some blamed production, and others claimed Willa had known about the joke or was never a full guest at all. I took the printed invitation from the kitchen counter. Audrey Rowan and Willa Rowan. The words had not changed. Someone had chosen the paper, approved the lettering, sealed the envelope, and mailed it to our home. Willa had not misunderstood an invitation. The family was trying to change what the invitation meant after using it to bring her to the entrance. Rebecca called just before 10. She was the cousin who had sent the live stream. "I hope I didn't make things worse," she said. "You showed me what was happening. I recorded part of it before the stream ended. Do not send it to anyone." "I won't." "Do not post it." "I would never do that." I believed her, but I needed to hear the promise. "What are they telling people?" I asked. Rebecca hesitated. "That you arrived already angry. We were 45 minutes early." "I know. What else?" "That you refused to let Willa participate in the family film. She refused to wear a sign." "I know that too." "Rebecca." She lowered her voice. "Celeste told some guests you chose not to attend after an argument about the formal photographs. She said Willa had not been included because she gets overwhelmed at large events." I looked toward the workshop. "Did Celeste say that before or after the video?" "After, while people were waiting to know whether the ceremony would continue. So she told them we left over photographs." "Yes." "She did not mention the sign." "No." "Did anyone believe her?" Some people wanted to. That answer was more honest than saying no one did. People often accepted the version that required the least from them. If Celeste had deliberately humiliated a child, the guests had to decide whether remaining at the wedding made them part of something ugly. If Audrey had overreacted to a photography disagreement, they could finish their drinks and wait for the music to start again. Did the ceremony continue? I asked. No. Adrian left with his parents. The guests were served dinner, but there were no vows. I did not feel satisfaction. A stopped ceremony did not undo what Willa had seen. Rebecca said, "Celeste is telling everyone the wedding is postponed, not cancelled. That is Adrian's decision. I thought you should know. Thank you." After the call, I wrote down the competing versions in one place. The sign was spontaneous. Production invented it. Willa knew. Willa was never a full guest. We left over photographs. Every version removed the fact everyone had witnessed, a 13-year-old girl being told to accept humiliation before entering a family wedding. At 11, an email arrived from an attorney whose firm represented Celeste in public relations and contract matters. The subject line read, "Proposed joint clarification." I opened the attachment. The document was only 1 page long. It began by describing the video as an unfinished wedding film segment that had been played because of a production error. It said our family had a long tradition of affectionate teasing based on childhood memories. It said Willa had been invited to participate in a lighthearted entrance ritual and had initially understood the nature of the event. It said I had consented to the filming. It said Celeste deeply regretted that a private joke had been misunderstood as a statement about adoption. The final paragraph praised Celeste for welcoming Willa into important family moments. There were signature lines for Celeste, Graham, Judith, and me. Beneath my signature was another line, parent and legal guardian of Willa Rowan. I read the document 3 times. They did not merely want my silence. They wanted my authorization. If I signed, the record would say, Willa had agreed until she became upset. It would say the camera captured a consensual joke. It would say Celeste had welcomed her. Most importantly, it would say I had approved. My name would turn their plan into a misunderstanding. I forwarded the document to an attorney I had used for business contracts and adoption paperwork. I asked her not to contact anyone yet. I only wanted confirmation that I should sign nothing. Her answer came within minutes. Do not sign, edit, or verbally approve any version of this statement. I printed the page and placed it beside the wedding invitation. 2 documents. One brought Willa to the door. The other tried to erase what happened when she arrived. At noon, I heard a car in the gravel lot beside the workshop. Judith stepped out carrying a large photo album. I went outside before she reached the door. "You cannot be here." She stopped. "I am your mother." "That does not answer what I said." "I only want to talk." "You have my number." "You turned your phone off." "I turned it back on." "You called 11 times." "Because you refused to answer." Judith held the album against her chest. She had changed out of her wedding dress, but her hair was still pinned in the elaborate style from the day before. "Celeste has not slept," she said. "Neither has Willa. Celeste's entire life has been thrown into chaos. Willa was told she had to wear a humiliating sign to enter her aunt's wedding. It was not meant to humiliate her. What was it meant to do?" Judith looked toward the workshop. "Is she in there?" "You are not speaking to her." "I am her grandmother." Judith insisted she had believed Willa understood the tradition. I reminded her that Willa had asked why no one else wore a sign. Judith answered that my daughter had always been sensitive about being adopted. She is sensitive because people keep using it to explain why she deserves less. She opened the album. The first page held photographs from my childhood, Celeste and I, in matching sweaters. Graham lifting us onto a tractor. Judith holding a birthday cake. "We were not a terrible family," she said. I stared at the photographs. "I did not say every day was terrible. You are acting as if one old joke defines your whole childhood. You brought that joke back for my daughter. We wanted to connect the past and present by putting her in the same sign. We thought she would laugh. You lied about the sash. Judith looked away. I knew you would refuse if I explained it badly. There was no good way to explain it. It was supposed to be 30 seconds. Because you are treating it like abuse. What would you call making a child accept humiliation before entering a room? Her eyes filled with tears. Judith shifted blame from Graham to Celeste's wedding pressure, then to Willa for refusing before anyone could laugh. Each defense moved responsibility away from the adults who had prepared the sign. When she warned that Willa would lose grandparents, an aunt and cousins, I said, "She did not lose you at the wedding. You chose the sign over her." Judith's tears spilled over. I had seen those tears settle arguments for most of my life. As a child, I apologized when my mother cried, even when I did not know what I had done. I felt the old reflex move through me. Offer coffee, lower my voice, tell her we could discuss it later, protect her from the discomfort of hearing what she had done. Instead, I said, "You need to leave. I brought these because I wanted Willa to see that she has always been part of this family." You left her out of the wedding photographs before she even arrived. Her face changed. It was small, but I saw it. When I mentioned the wedding photographs, Judith's face changed. She insisted I knew nothing about the plan, but Celeste had already told guests we left over the pictures. Judith accused me of gathering people against them and asked again to speak to Willa. No, she heard your side at the entrance. I walked her to the car. I walked to Judith's car and opened the passenger door. She stared at me. Judith accused me of enjoying the power to punish them and of resenting Celeste. I told her this was not about childhood jealousy. Adrian would decide whom he married, and Celeste had given him reason to doubt her. She said Graham was trying to protect Celeste, and she was trying to protect the family. Willa is my family, I answered. Judith insisted they were my family too. Then you should have acted like it. Before driving away, she warned me not to pretend I had no part in it if Celeste lost Adrian. I told her Celeste had created that possibility at the entrance. Judith drove away. I remained in the lot until her car disappeared. When I turned around, Willa stood inside the workshop doorway. I did not know how long she had been there. You heard us, I said. Some of it. I told her she could not speak to you. I heard that. She went back inside. I followed at a distance. The small tool chest sat on the center workbench. Willa had removed the loose handle and arranged the screws by size. She said I would lose my family, Willa said. She said that to make me let her talk to you. Will I? Lose them? She nodded. I do not know what relationship will be possible after this. That sounds like yes. It might be. She pressed one screw against the workbench. Would signing that paper make them stop calling? Willa asked. She had seen the statement on the kitchen table. I admitted it might quiet the public argument and keep Judith away for a while. But it would also say Willa had agreed. I had consented. And Celeste had welcomed her. Do you want to sign it? Part of me wants the calls to stop. Part of me wants to wake up without 40 people telling me I destroyed a wedding. But I will not sign a lie. Because it would say I misunderstood. Yes. I didn't misunderstand. I know. Willa fitted the correct screw into the handle. Then don't sign it. I won't. She tightened the screw. She did not smile or call me Mom, but she did not ask me to leave the workshop. That afternoon, Lena sent the written preservation notice she had promised. The message contained only verified production facts. Park Frame Studio had received a document titled, Then and Now Family Tradition. The old footage had been delivered by Judith Rowan. The document stated that Willa's legal guardian had approved her participation. No signed parental release existed in the production file. A placeholder for the entrance clip had been created before the wedding. The project folder had been opened on September 19th, 3 weeks before we arrived at Ashbridge House. I read the date again. September 19th. Graham had not grabbed a piece of board that morning. Judith had not misunderstood an impulsive joke. Celeste had not merely lost her temper when we refused. For 3 weeks, someone had been building a place for my daughter inside that video. Not a seat, not a family photograph, a place beneath a sign. I printed Lena's message and placed it beside the wedding invitation and the proposed statement. 3 pages now sat on my kitchen table. One said Willa belonged. One said she had agreed to be humiliated. One proved the humiliation had been planned before she arrived. Willa returned to the workshop after lunch. She did not ask what I was doing, and I did not force the papers into her hands. She had spent the morning learning that adults could turn one sentence into 5 different lies. I wanted to give her one afternoon where she did not have to carry another document. I went upstairs to the storage closet instead. There were 6 boxes on the top shelf. I had moved them from my parents' house when I was 22, then carried them through 2 apartments, 1 rented farmhouse, and finally this house. I almost never opened them. The 3rd box held what I was looking for. A small brass badge rested beneath old report cards and school programs. The front read Allegheny Crest Youth Recognition, 2001. Celeste's name was engraved along the bottom. Under the badge was a photograph of her standing outside the club in a white dress, holding a certificate. Graham stood behind her with one hand on her shoulder. Judith was smiling beside him. I appeared at the edge of the picture. Only one side of my body was visible. The photographer had cropped out the sign, but a strip of cream ribbon crossed my shoulder. I touched the ribbon in the photograph, then searched the bottom of the box. A real strip of faded fabric lay beneath a stack of birthday cards. I had forgotten I kept it. The ribbon felt rougher than I remembered. One end still had a dark mark, where Graham had pushed it through the hole in the board. I carried the badge, photograph, and ribbon downstairs. Willa was standing in the doorway between the kitchen and workshop. "What is that?" she asked. "The ribbon from the first sign." She did not move closer. "You kept it?" "I think I hid it." "Why?" "At 15, I probably thought I might need proof one day." "Did you?" No one asked. She came to the table and looked at the photograph. "You are almost cut out. I remember standing farther away. Maybe they told you to move." "They did." The memory returned through small pieces instead of one complete scene. Rainwater soaking the cuffs of my jeans. The smell of wet wood from my grandfather's barn. Celeste's white dress. Judith telling me my boots were leaving mud on the stone. I had spent that morning helping my grandfather repair roof panels damaged during a storm. Graham said we would stop at home before Celeste's ceremony, but we were late. He drove directly to the club. I was still wearing my grandfather's red flannel shirt. When Graham saw the people waiting near the entrance, he looked at me as if I had chosen to embarrass him. "You cannot stand next to your sister looking like that," he said. I told him I could wait in the car. That should have solved the problem. Instead, Graham found a piece of white promotional board in the trunk. He used a thick black marker from his sales bag and wrote Country Bumpkin across it. At first I thought he meant to hold it himself. Then he punched 2 holes and threaded ribbon through them. "You want me to wear that?" I asked. "It will make people laugh." "I do not want to." Celeste was already upset because her ceremony was starting late. Judith said my attitude was making everything worse. Graham accused me of being jealous because Celeste had been selected for the program and I had not. I told him I had never applied. He said that proved his point. Judith turned on the camcorder before the sign went over my head. She later claimed she had only wanted footage of Celeste receiving her certificate, but the recording began while Graham was still tying the ribbon. I wore the sign because every refusal created a new accusation. I was selfish. I was jealous. I did not support my sister. I was ruining a rare opportunity. I was making my mother cry. By the time Graham placed the board against my chest, wearing it felt like the fastest way to end the punishment. That was the part my family remembered as agreement. Willa sat across from me. "What happened after the video stopped?" "They let me take it off after the photographs." "Did you go inside?" for part of the ceremony. Where did you sit? In the back. Next to Grandma and Grandpa? No, they sat with Celeste. Willa looked at the old badge. So they used you for the joke, then left you alone. I suppose they did. You do not have to say suppose. She was right again. They used me for the joke, then left me alone. Willa touched the edge of the photograph, but not the ribbon. Did you ever tell anyone? My grandfather asked why I was quiet on the drive home. I said I was tired. Why didn't you tell him? I thought he might confront Dad. Would that have been bad? At 15, I thought the argument would become my fault. Willa looked toward the 3 documents on the table. That is what they are doing now. Yes. They were not defending the sign. They were trying to make my refusal to protect it the real offense. I picked up the photograph again. For years, I had used the incident as proof that I understood my family. I knew Graham could be cruel when embarrassed. I knew Judith turned cruelty into sentiment. I knew Celeste accepted whatever made her appear superior. I believed that knowledge gave me control. It had only taught me how to predict the injury. Prediction was not prevention. I remembered every time I had translated my family for Willa. That is just how Grandpa talks. Grandma does not know the right words. Celeste cares in her own way. We can leave, if it becomes uncomfortable. I had presented escape as protection, while continuing to bring her into places where escape might become necessary. My phone rang shortly after 3. Lena asked whether I was willing to meet at her studio the next morning. She had finished reviewing the production chain and wanted to explain exactly how the clip had reached the ballroom screen. Willa was sitting at the workbench when I told her. Do you want to come? I asked. No. All right. She glanced up, apparently surprised I had not tried to persuade her. Will you tell me what she says? Yes. You can decide how much you want to know. The next morning, I drove 40 minutes to Park Frame Studio. The office occupied the 2nd floor of a converted warehouse outside Pittsburgh. Lena met me in a small conference room with glass walls and a television mounted above a cabinet. Another woman sat at the table. Lena introduced her as the company's attorney. No one asked me to sign anything. Lena placed a printed timeline in front of me. The wedding film was not created in 35 minutes, she said. Most of it was completed before Saturday. She showed me the structure, childhood photographs, interviews with Celeste and Adrian, the title From Our Roots to Forever, the restored 2001 tape, then a blank space labeled Present-Day Family Tradition Clip. The old footage and transition were already rendered, Lena explained. The entrance team was instructed to capture a 20 to 30 second reenactment. An assistant would insert the selected take into the placeholder. Who selected the take? The camera operator marked it because that was the segment assigned in the schedule. After your daughter refused, the operator contacted our floor producer and said the scene had become confrontational. So why was it used? Lena turned one page. Celeste instructed the floor producer to use it anyway. The instruction had been sent through the internal production chat. Use the take. Audrey always makes things look worse than they are. The message was time-stamped 8 minutes after we left the entrance. I read it twice. She knew exactly what was in the clip. She knew there had been an argument, Lena said. She may not have listened to the full audio before giving the instruction. She was the person speaking. Yes, then she knew enough. Lena did not argue. The assistant editor inserted the marked clip. She continued. The program entered the playback queue 19 minutes later. It began 35 minutes after you left. And the old tape. Celeste approved a shorter preview 2 weeks before the wedding. In that preview, the old section ended after the first image of you wearing the sign. Your mother later delivered a higher quality transfer containing an additional 46 seconds. The part with Graham and Judith speaking. Yes. Did Celeste approve that longer version? We have no record that she watched it. That did not make her innocent. She had ordered the new footage used after seeing Willa refuse. But it explained why her panic began when the past continued beyond the image she expected. What happened when she told you to stop it? Celeste was in the aisle. The nearest console controlled the presentation computer for speeches, not the master program output. The master operator was in the production booth on the mezzanine. By the time staff reached him, confirmed the instruction, blanked the screens, and muted the ballroom feed, the old clip had already played. How long? 11 seconds after she first shouted. 11 seconds. Long enough for the room to hear Celeste say I made her look better. Long enough for Graham to explain the purpose of my humiliation. Long enough for Judith to order me to smile. Not long enough for the video to expose everything. Only enough to make the family explain why the same sign existed twice. Lena moved another document toward me. This is the production brief. The title appeared at the top. Then, and now family tradition. The description called the sign a playful Rowan family ritual, representing how far the sisters had come from their rural beginnings. One line stated that Audrey Rowan had approved the participation of her minor daughter. I never approved this. I know. Who wrote that? The document was submitted from an email address belonging to Judith Rowan. I stared at my mother's name. Lena said, "We failed to require your actual signature. That was our responsibility. You had a contract saying a parent needed to consent." Yes. But someone accepted a sentence in a brief instead. Yes. Because Celeste was the client. Lena folded her hands. Because the production team trusted information supplied by the bride and venue staff. That trust was misplaced. It was not enough to call it misplaced, but at least she did not call it a misunderstanding. What else was in the brief? I asked. Lena showed me the visual schedule. The entrance segment included Willa's name. The principal family portrait list did not. Neither did the seating group marked immediate family. My name appeared once, in a wide extended family photograph scheduled after the ceremony. Willa was invited to be recorded, but not included. I looked at the page until the names blurred. They wanted her in the video. Yes, but not in the family photographs. That is what the schedule shows. Was there a seat for her? I do not have the final seating chart. Ashbridge House controls that record. Lena's attorney allowed me to inspect the relevant pages and photograph only redacted copies cleared for release. The complete production files would remain preserved, and formal copies would pass through our attorneys. Before I left, Lena said, "I want to apologize directly to Willa when she is ready. She may never want that. I understand." "No," I said. "You understand that she may refuse. That is not the same as being ready for her answer." Lena nodded. "You are right." At home, Willa was repairing a hand plane in the workshop. She had laid the metal pieces on a cloth in the order she removed them. I placed copies of the production brief and visual schedule on a side table. "You do not have to read them," I said. "What did you learn?" I told her how the template worked. I told her the old footage had been prepared before the wedding. I told her Celeste ordered the entrance take used after we left. I told her Judith claimed I had approved. Then I told her about the portrait plan. Willa kept her eyes on the handplane. "So my name was in the movie?" "Yes, but not in the family picture." "No, or the family seats. We do not have that chart yet, but probably not. I do not want to guess." She looked at me. "They invited me to wear the sign." "Yes, and after that?" "I think they expected us to leave." She wiped oil from one metal piece. "Can they give the video to people?" "Not officially without a fight." Lena locked the master files. "Because you are a minor, and I never signed a release, there are restrictions." "What about the people who watched online?" "The stream was private, but someone could have recorded it. I cannot promise there are no copies. I do not want to be the girl from that wedding video." "I know. I do not want people sharing my face to prove your family is awful." "I will not authorize that." "What if the club needs to see it?" "That is your choice too, As much as I can make it your choice. Legally, I sign because I am your parent. But I will not sign against what you want. Willa considered this. They can see only what they need. All right. No news. All right. No channel using it as some lesson about adopted kids. Agreed. No before, and after pictures of you and me wearing the signs. Never. She nodded. It was the first decision about the wedding that belonged entirely to her. I gathered the copies from the table. Willa stopped me. Leave the portrait plan. Are you sure? I want to see my name. I set it back down. She studied the page for several minutes. Then she touched the line for the entrance segment. They invited me as a prop. The word sounded too adult coming from her, but the page had taught it to her. I sat beside her. They used your invitation to bring you there. That is not the same as inviting me. No. She looked at the blank space, where her name should have appeared among the family portraits. Can someone be invited as a prop, but not as a guest? I looked at the document my sister had approved. Yes, I said. That is exactly what they did. On Tuesday morning, Dana Kessler called from Ashbridge House. She introduced herself as the Director of Human Resources and Compliance and asked whether I was willing to participate in an internal review. I need to understand what kind of review, I said. It concerns the use of club staff, vendor accounts, guest systems, and production resources during a private event. Does it concern what happened to Willa? It concerns how an employee used workplace authority to make it happen. That distinction mattered. Dana was not calling to decide whether my family had been cruel. She was calling because Celeste had used Ashbridge House, as if it belonged to her. I told Dana that Willa's image could not be distributed, and that no one would place her in a room with the adults who had humiliated her. Every request involving her had to come through me and my attorney. Dana agreed. Interviews would be separate, and Willa could speak later, choose another format, or provide no statement at all. The review would begin with records already stored inside club systems. What records have you already found? I asked. I would rather not give you conclusions before we complete preservation. I am not asking for conclusions. There was a brief silence. We found enough to confirm the entrance segment was not created on the wedding morning. I closed my eyes. I already know the production folder was opened 3 weeks earlier. Our records begin around the same time. After the call, I found Willa in the workshop tightening the blade assembly on the hand plane. A woman from Ashbridge House called, I said. Willa kept working. Is she trying to protect Aunt Celeste? She works for the club. She is investigating how Celeste used club systems. That sounds like protecting the club. It probably is. Willa looked up. Does that make it bad? No. It means we should understand what she can and cannot decide. What can she decide? Whether Celeste broke workplace rules. She cannot decide whether Grandma is a good person, or whether we have to forgive anyone. Willa nodded. Will I have to talk to her? No. What if I want to? Then you choose how. She returned to the tool. Can I decide later? Yes. Dana's written outline divided the evidence into 4 groups. Production records, invitation and venue records, the sign and vendor documents, and witness accounts. No single item would carry the whole story. The video showed what happened, while the other records had to establish who planned it and why. 3 days later, my attorney and I joined Dana in a private conference room at Ashbridge House. I had not returned since the wedding. The entrance looked smaller without flowers and cameras. No valet opened my door. No guests crossed the stone floor. A maintenance worker was replacing a light near the same corridor where Graham had held out the sign. I forced myself to keep walking. Dana met us near the administrative offices. She was a compact woman with short, silver-streaked hair and a dark green folder tucked beneath one arm. She did not offer sympathy before facts. I appreciated that. Inside the conference room, she explained what she was permitted to show me. These are records connected directly to your daughter and the event, she said. Some employee materials will remain confidential. Your attorney will receive copies of anything we release to you. She opened the folder. The first page was an invoice from an approved printing vendor used by Ashbridge House for menus, directional signs, table cards, and event materials. The client line read Celeste Rowan Wedding. The order date was September 19th. The item description read, Custom white-painted birch plywood placard. The artwork preview appeared beneath it. Country Bumpkin. The letters were identical to the sign at the entrance. My attorney asked, Who placed the order? The vendor account shows the request was submitted under the private event code assigned to Miss Rowan's wedding. The attached email came from Graham Rowan. Dana slid another page toward me. Graham's message was short. Please match the lettering in the reference image. It is an old family joke we are recreating for the wedding film. Below the message was a still image taken from the 2001 tape. 15-year-old me stood beneath the old sign. For several seconds, I could not read anything else. My father had searched through footage of me being humiliated, frozen the image, and sent it to a printer as a design reference. My attorney placed one hand near the page. Do you need a break? No. Dana waited until I looked up. The vendor asked for approximate dimensions, she said. The next attachment came from Judith. She had provided the shoulder measurement I gave her for the supposed sash. Please make the ribbon soft enough for formal clothing. She is 13 and narrow through the shoulders. The sign should hang high enough to remain visible in photographs. I heard Judith's voice from the phone call 3 weeks before the wedding. Stand straight, sweetheart. I only need the distance from one shoulder to the other. Willa had stood in our kitchen while I measured her. I had held the tape. My hand had helped them fit the sign. I pushed the page away. I gave Judith that measurement. Dana did not tell me it was not my fault. She said, What reason did she give you? A ceremonial sash. Do you have the message? Yes. Please provide it through your attorney. I nodded. The invoice and artwork were available because Celeste had used the club's approved vendor account and reimbursed the charge through her wedding bill. The record had not come from an unrelated printer handing over a customer's private order. The final invoice had been delivered to Celeste's event account. Dana could not yet say whether Celeste had opened every attachment, but the charge, artwork, and production segment existed inside systems she controlled. The next page came from the guest management system. Willa Rowan. Age 13. Family entrance segment before admission. Direct guest to West Vestibule Camera Station. Do not permit entry into the main hall before segment completion. If Audrey Rowan objects, contact Graham Rowan. Do not refer issue to general venue management unless requested by Miss Celeste Rowan. My attorney read the note twice. Who entered it? A member services coordinator entered the language after receiving written instruction from Celeste. Did the employee know what the segment involved? The employee says no. The instruction was described as a private family tradition. Who approved it? Celeste's credentials were used to approve the note. I looked at the last sentence again. Do not refer issue to general venue management. Celeste had created a private channel around anyone who might have asked why a child needed to complete a filmed ritual before entering. She had not merely expected Willa to wear the sign. She had built the venue around the expectation that I would object. Why was Graham the contact instead of Judith? I asked. That is not answered in the system record. I knew the answer anyway. Graham created pressure. Judith softened it. Celeste controlled the room. Dana opened a second folder. The next documents concern the visual schedule. I had already seen one version through Lena, but the club file contained more detail. The principal family portraits listed Celeste, Adrian, both sets of parents, siblings, grandparents, and selected relatives. My name did not appear in the first 3 groupings. Willa's name did not appear anywhere. A later wide photograph included Audrey Rowan under extended family. The event schedule placed that photograph after cocktail service. The entrance segment took place before the ceremony. They expected me to stay after they did that to Willa, I said. Dana turned one page. A production message from Celeste appeared beside the portrait schedule. If Audrey cannot laugh, she will leave before formal portraits. Do not hold the photography timeline for her. The message had been sent 2 days before the wedding. Not after an argument, not after Willa refused. 2 days before, my attorney asked. Who received this? The lead floor coordinator and the photography scheduler. Did either person question it? One employee asked whether Willa should be added to the child family grouping. Miss Rowan replied that Willa was part of the film moment, not the blood family portrait group. My chest tightened. Is that reply in writing? Dana turned another page. There it was. Willa's appearance on the invitation is for the family segment. It does not place her in the blood family portrait group. Audrey has agreed to the tradition and understands the distinction. Judith had written the first false statement about my consent in the production brief. Celeste had repeated it inside the club system. They had made my supposed agreement the foundation beneath every locked door. I had never agreed, and the invitation had never warned that Willa's name meant film participant rather than family guest. I asked Dana, was there a seat for her? The seating plan submitted to catering had one place assigned to Audrey Rowan in the extended family section. There was no place card for Willa. My attorney looked at me. I felt strangely calm. So, even if she wore the sign, she had nowhere to sit. That is what the final catering record shows. And if I entered with her after filming? Staff would have needed instructions concerning where to place her. Instructions from Celeste. Yes. The entire false choice became visible. If Willa wore the sign, they would obtain the footage and then discover there was no family seat for her. If she refused, Graham would prevent her from entering. If I argued, Celeste would say I disrupted the wedding. If I left, she would tell guests I chose not to attend. Every path led to the same empty place in the photographs. The only variable was how much dignity Willa would surrender before disappearing. Dana closed the folder. Dana reminded me that the club was reviewing workplace conduct rather than deciding our family relationships. The records established pre-planning, use of club systems, exclusion from seating and portraits, and repeated false claims of my consent. My attorney gave Dana the invitation, Judith's measurement message, and Lena's confirmation that no signed parental release existed. Employee details unrelated to us were redacted, and only formally released copies would leave the club's restricted file. Graham and Judith could be interviewed about relevant facts, but could not be compelled because they were not employees. Dana said they would be interviewed separately to reduce coordinated answers. When the meeting ended, Dana gave my attorney copies of the documents she was authorized to release. As I stood, she asked, "Did Mr. Ashford know your daughter was excluded from the portrait plan?" "I do not know." "Did he ever discuss limited participation with you?" "No." "Did he know Willa was invited?" "Yes. He saw the invitation at a family dinner in August." "Did he ask why she was absent from the portrait schedule?" "I had never seen the schedule before the wedding." Dana wrote something down. "Why does Adrian's knowledge matter to the club review?" I asked. "It may not affect the employment decision. I am separating what Miss Rowan told different people before the event. If she represented to Mr. Ashford that the exclusion came from you, that helps establish whether the false consent claim was accidental or part of a broader pattern. I left Ashbridge House with a folder thick enough to prove that Willa's absence had been scheduled before her arrival. The drive home took 70 minutes. I did not call anyone. At home, Willa saw the folder beside my keys. I told her Graham had sent the old image to the printer, Judith had used the shoulder measurement for the ribbon, and Celeste's credentials had approved the entrance instruction. The answer about Celeste changed her face most. Some part of her had still hoped the words at the doorway were anger rather than policy. I explained that there had been no assigned seat for her, and no place in the principal family portraits. My name appeared only in a later extended family photograph. So you could be family after I was gone, she said. I offered to stop, but she asked to see the portrait schedule. Can I see the part about the pictures? I removed only the portrait schedule and Celeste's message. Willa read the first page, then the second. Her finger stopped beneath one line. If Audrey cannot laugh, she will leave before formal portraits. She read it again. They knew you would leave. They expected it. They wanted you to. Yes. Willa looked at the empty place where her name should have been. If I wore the sign, they got the joke. Yes. Either way, I wasn't in the picture. No. Willa closed the folder. That means there was no right answer. They designed both outcomes, I said. But your refusal was still yours. They did not get the obedient picture they expected. She opened the folder once more and read Celeste's sentence. They didn't invite us to come. They invited us to disappear. There was nothing left to soften. Yes. My phone rang on the counter. Dana's name appeared on the screen. I answered. I have one more question before we schedule the next interviews, she said. All right. What did Adrian Ashford know about Willa's removal from the principal family portraits before the wedding? Dana's question followed me long after the call ended. Adrian had not held the sign or blocked Willa at the entrance, but he had been inside the building they were trying to keep her out of. I don't know what he knew, I told Dana. Did he ever discuss the family portraits with you? No. Did Celeste ever say he approved the list? Not to me. Then I will ask him separately. Willa was still sitting across from me, watching my face. What did she ask? What Adrian knew about the photographs. What do you think he knew? I think he knew Celeste did not want us close to the wedding. That is not the same as knowing about the sign. No. Does that make him good? I don't know. She looked down at her history book. Adults like to place people into clean categories after the damage was visible, innocent or guilty, kind or cruel, victim or accomplice. Adrian did not fit neatly into any of them. That did not mean he belonged nowhere. It meant I needed facts. My attorney arranged a meeting for Thursday afternoon. Adrian requested that we meet at his law office rather than Ashbridge House. His attorney sat beside him. Mine sat beside me. There were no relatives, cameras, or club representatives in the room. Adrian looked as if he had not slept. His wedding suit had been replaced by a gray business jacket, and he kept rubbing his bare ring finger, as though the gesture had outlived the ceremony. He had never worn one. The mark came from the band he had tried on during the rehearsal and apparently kept wearing afterward. I want to begin by saying I am sorry for what happened to Willa, he said. Then say what you are sorry for. His attorney glanced at him, but Adrian answered, I am sorry she was invited under false pretenses. I am sorry she was stopped at the door. I am sorry Celeste used her adoption to say she did not belong. Did you know any of that would happen? No. Did you know she was excluded from the principal family portraits? He looked at his attorney before replying. Yes, the word landed quietly. What were you told? Celeste said Willa did not like formal photographs and became overwhelmed in large groups. Did you ask me? No. Did you ask Willa? No. Why did you believe Celeste? She was planning the event. I assumed she had discussed it with you. Did she say she discussed it with me? Adrian's expression changed. She said you preferred limited participation. I waited. Adrian understood the distinction. No. She did not say she had spoken to you directly. My attorney wrote something down. When did you see the portrait plan? I asked. About 2 weeks before the wedding. Did you notice Willa's name was missing? Yes. Did you notice mine appeared only in one extended family photograph? Yes. And that did not concern you? I thought the relationship between you and Celeste was strained. It was. I believed the schedule reflected that. The schedule reflected that she wanted my daughter filmed in a humiliating sign and then removed before the family pictures. I did not know about the sign. You knew about the removal. Adrian looked at the table. Yes. What else did she tell you? She said Willa did not understand formal settings. She is 13. She said Willa sometimes made blunt comments. So does Celeste. His attorney shifted in her chair. Adrian did not defend her. I continued. Did Celeste ever call Belmere embarrassing? Yes. Did she mock my work? She called it a hobby more than once. It supports 4 people. I know that now. You knew I owned the company. Yes. Then what did you think she meant by hobby? He rubbed one hand over his jaw. I thought it was the way sisters talk about each other. That answer is doing a great deal of work for you. I understand. No, I do not think you do. He looked up. You heard her mock my truck, my town, and my work? You saw her remove my daughter from the photographs. You accepted an explanation that came only from the person doing the excluding. You did not know the last act, but you kept looking away from every rehearsal. The room went silent. Adrian's attorney asked whether we wanted a break. No, he said. He turned toward me. You are right. The agreement did not make me feel better. Is the engagement over? I asked. It is paused. I have not made a permanent decision. Why not? Because Celeste says your parents created the entire plan without her knowledge. She approved the entrance instruction. I have not seen that record. Dana has. I am cooperating with the club review. That is not an answer. Adrian folded his hands. I am not going to end a 5-year relationship based only on what different people are telling me while an investigation is still open. Then don't, he blinked. I did not come here to convince you to leave her. I know. Do you? Yes. Because you keep speaking as though I owe you the final piece that makes your decision comfortable. I am asking for facts. You already had facts before the wedding. You just called them family tension, because that let your plans continue. His face tightened, but he did not argue. I gave him only what I could support. The formal invitation named Willa. The portrait plan excluded her. The guest system blocked her before entry. The production brief falsely claimed I had consented. Celeste had instructed the production team to use the entrance take after we left. I did not tell him what choice to make. I did not ask whether Adrian's parents were embarrassed. I did not offer to repair the wedding. When the meeting ended, he walked us to the door. Audrey, he said. I stopped. I should have asked you about the photographs. Yes. I should have questioned the way Celeste spoke about Willa. Yes. I thought not taking sides made me fair. It made you useful. He lowered his eyes. I left before he could turn that sentence into another apology. The first real cost arrived the next morning. Rowan Timber Restoration had been expecting final approval on the Bellwether Inn project, a $78,000 restoration involving the front porch, original staircase, and 2 damaged exterior beams. We had spent 6 weeks preparing estimates and sourcing reclaimed oak. The owner had signed a letter of intent, but not the final construction contract. I expected the project to keep all 4 of us busy through winter. Instead, the owner called and asked whether we could postpone our start meeting. For how long? I asked. I am not certain. Is there a problem with our proposal? No. Your work is excellent. Then what changed? He paused. The inn received support from several local donors. Some attended the wedding. I looked toward my office window. One of my employees was unloading tools from the work van. What did they say? That there is a family dispute involving a private video. The video showed my daughter being humiliated. I am not taking a position. You are postponing my work because someone else took a position. I need to protect the project. From what? Publicity. I almost laughed. My family had built an entire plan around making Willa disappear without attention. Now, the attention was being used to make me disappear from a contract. Are you canceling the letter of intent? I asked. It is not a binding construction agreement. I know what it is. I will contact you when we make a final decision. He ended the call without giving me a date. I opened the business account. We had $28,000 in reserve. That was enough to cover payroll, taxes, insurance, and operating costs for a limited period, but not enough to replace an entire winter project without adjustments. I calculated what I could cut: my own pay, equipment replacement, the workshop heating upgrade, a planned contribution to Willa's education account. I stopped when I reached that line. The damage had moved beyond the wedding entrance. That afternoon, Willa came into my office carrying 2 cups of tea. You look like you are doing math you hate. I am. Did something happen? A project may not move forward. The inn? Yes. Because of the wedding? That is part of it. She placed 1 cup beside me. Will we lose the house? No. It was the truth. Will you have to fire anyone? Not if I can avoid it. Is that also the truth? Yes. She sat in the chair across from my desk. Would this have happened if I wore the sign? I closed the spreadsheet. This happened because adults planned to humiliate you, and then lied about it. She held my gaze until I answered the question she had actually asked. I had taught her to recognize an answer that moved around the truth. The video probably would not have played the same way if you wore it and smiled. So, the project might be fine. Maybe. She stared into her tea. Then saying no cost you money. Saying no protected you. It can be both. Yes, it can. Are you mad at me? No. Not even a little? Not even a little. What if you lose the project? I will still not be angry with you. She looked at me carefully. People say that when they want kids to stop asking. I know. What happens if I ask again next week? I will give you the same answer. She nodded, but her expression told me the promise had entered a testing period. 2 days later, Judith found a way around the contact boundary. Willa's phone rang while we were eating dinner. The number was unfamiliar, but the area code was local. She answered before I could stop her. Hello? I watched the color leave her face. She placed the phone on speaker without speaking. Judith's voice filled the kitchen. Willa, sweetheart, please do not hang up. Willa looked at me. I reached for the phone, but she shook her head. What do you want? She asked. I only want you to know none of us meant to hurt you. You told me to wear the sign. I thought you knew it was a joke. Did you think I knew there was no seat for me? Judith went silent. Willa's fingers tightened around the edge of the table. Your mother is making decisions while she is angry, Judith said. She is cutting you off from people who love you. My mother did not call me from a number I did not know. I had no choice because she blocked me. You had the choice not to lie about the sash. Judith's voice became softer. You are very young. Families have disagreements, but we do not throw people away. Willa's eyes met mine. You told Mom she was taking away your granddaughter. I was upset. You did not call me your granddaughter at the wedding. That is not true. You said I had to wear the sign. Your grandfather said that. You stood next to him. I was trying to keep the peace. Willa pushed the phone away. I do not want to talk to you. Willa, please. She ended the call. For several seconds, she stared at the dark screen. I took the phone and saved the number. I am sorry, I said. She got through. I should have warned you not to answer unknown numbers. You cannot warn me about every number. No, you always close the door after someone has already come in. The sentence struck harder because she did not raise her voice. You are right. She looked surprised. I continued before I could defend myself. I blocked their known numbers. I told myself that was enough. It wasn't. What else can you do? I can tell them clearly that indirect contact is also forbidden. I can tell the school not to transfer calls or allow visits. I can tell your therapist. I can ask relatives not to carry messages. What if Grandma uses another number? You do not have to answer any number you do not recognize. What if it is important? Then they can leave a voicemail. We listened together. Willa picked up her fork but did not eat. Are you going to call her? No. Why not? Because calling would give her another conversation. I am going to put the boundary in writing. That night, with my attorney's guidance, I sent one message to Graham, Judith, and Celeste. Do not contact Willa directly. Do not contact her through relatives, unknown numbers, gifts, school, social media, or third parties. Any necessary communication must be written and sent to me or my attorney. This is a parental boundary, not an invitation to debate. I did not threaten arrest. I did not claim a court order. I did not write that I would never speak to them again. I stated what would happen now. Then I emailed Willa's school counselor and principal. I gave only the necessary facts. No visitors. No message delivery. No schedule information. No calls transferred from relatives. Her therapist received the same information. Judith replied within 6 minutes. I cannot believe my own daughter is treating me like a criminal. I did not answer. Graham wrote, You are letting a child control the family. I did not answer. Celeste sent nothing. The next morning, a courier delivered a sealed envelope to my workshop. It contained a letter from Graham and a proposed agreement. He offered $19,000 to replace the expected profit from the Bellwether Inn project. He offered up to $7,500 for Willa's therapy over the next 12 months. He promised Celeste would not contact us. At the bottom, he wrote that the money was not payment for silence. It was a practical effort to repair the damage. The attached statement said otherwise. To receive the money, I had to confirm that the country bumpkin sign was a long-standing family tradition, that Willa had misunderstood its affectionate purpose, and that no discrimination had been intended. The final line waited above my signature. I read Graham's handwritten note once more. This gives you everything your daughter needs. Do not let pride destroy her future. The offer totaled $26,500. All I had to do was place Willa's name beneath their lie. I carried the agreement into my office and closed the door. Outside, one of my employees started the table saw. The steady mechanical sound traveled through the wall while I read Graham's letter again. $19,000 to replace the profit I expected from the Bellwether Inn project. Up to $7,500 for Willa's therapy over the next 12 months. A private, written apology. A promise that Celeste would not contact us again. The offer looked generous until I reached the condition. I had to confirm that the country bumpkin sign was part of an affectionate family tradition. I had to state that Willa had misunderstood its purpose. I had to agree that no one intended to exclude or discriminate against her. The agreement did not mention that there was no seat for Willa. It did not mention the portrait plan. It did not mention Judith lying about a ceremonial sash. It did not mention Celeste's instruction to use the entrance footage after hearing Willa refuse. It turned every deliberate act into a misunderstanding and every objection into hurt feelings. My signature would not merely protect Graham, Judith, and Celeste. It would become their strongest evidence. They could point to it and say Willa's own mother agreed. I opened the business spreadsheet. Without the inn project, the next 3 months would be tight. We still had smaller contracts, but winter restoration work was unpredictable. One canceled job could become 2 if weather delayed exterior projects. The business account held $28,000. Payroll and payroll taxes took more than $16,000 each month. Insurance, fuel, rent on equipment, and material deposits consumed the rest quickly. I could reduce my own pay, delay equipment replacement, and postpone planned repairs to the workshop heating system. That would protect my employees for a while. It would not leave much room for emergencies. I opened my personal account. $18,000 in savings. Enough to keep us safe, but not enough to pretend money did not matter. Willa's therapist charged $175 per session. Insurance reimbursed part of it, but not all. If Willa needed weekly sessions for a year, Graham's offer would cover nearly everything we paid ourselves. The money could make our lives easier. That was what made the offer dangerous. A ridiculous offer would have been simple to reject. Graham had chosen figures that matched real needs. He had calculated the exact pressure points and placed a price beside each one. My business. Willa's therapy. My fear that protecting her would damage the lives of my employees. Then he called the price practical repair. I placed the agreement face down. For several minutes, I imagined accepting it. The in-profit would return. I would not have to reduce my salary. Willa's therapy would be covered. The phone calls might stop. Relatives would move on to another scandal. Celeste could tell people the wedding film had shown a private joke without context. We could close the door and live quietly. The thought brought relief for less than a minute. Then I imagined Willa finding the signed statement years later. She would read that I had agreed she misunderstood. She would see my name beneath the claim that the people who trapped her at the entrance had meant no harm. She would know that when the pressure became expensive, I let money define what happened to her. I folded the agreement and placed it back inside the envelope. I did not sign it, but I also did not send my refusal immediately. I wanted to speak to Willa without making her feel responsible for my decision. She came home from school at 3:30. She dropped her backpack beside the kitchen bench, noticed the envelope on the counter, and stopped. "What is that?" "An offer from Graham." She no longer called him Grandpa when we were alone. "What kind of offer?" I told her the amounts. Her eyebrows rose when I mentioned the project money. "That is a lot." "Yes." "Can he afford it?" "Yes. He and Judith have a paid-off house, retirement savings, and her pension. It would matter to them, but it would not ruin them." "What does he want?" "For me to sign a statement." "The same one?" "A similar one." Willa took off her coat and hung it carefully. "What does this one say?" "That the sign was a family tradition, that you misunderstood it, that no one intended to treat you differently because you were adopted." She stood with one hand still on the coat hook. "Would that be a lie?" "Yes." "Would the money help?" "Yes." "Could it keep your workers employed?" "I can keep them employed without it for now." "For how long?" "That is not something you need to solve." I did not ask if I had to solve it. I stopped. She came to the table and sat across from me. "Would you lose the house?" "No." "Would we have food?" "Yes." "Would I still go to therapy?" "Yes." "Then what would change?" "I would reduce my pay. We would delay some things. I might need to find smaller jobs more quickly." "Would you be scared?" "I am already scared." She looked at the envelope. "If you sign it, would they say I agreed?" "They would say you understood what the sign meant and changed your mind." "I never understood, because no one told me." "I know. They told me about a sash." "Yes." "And there was no seat." "No." "Then the written story would be false." "Yes." She did not tell me what to do. She looked toward the workshop door. "Does part of you want to take it?" I could have said no and looked stronger. Instead, I said, "Yes." Her eyes returned to mine. "Because of the money?" "Because I want the pressure to stop. Because I want payroll to feel safe. Because I do not want to wonder whether therapy costs are changing what we can afford. Because part of me still thinks peace is something I can purchase if I give the right person what they want." "Would it be peace?" "No." "What would it be?" "Silence." She nodded slowly. "They are different." "Yes." She reached for the envelope but stopped before touching it. "Are you going to sign?" "No." You already decided? I decided before you came home. Then why did you tell me? Because the offer is about you. I did not want to hide it. But the business decision is mine, and the legal decision is mine. You do not have to carry either one. Willa stared at the table. Can I say what I think? Always. If you signed, I would know why. The answer surprised me. She continued, I would know the money mattered. I would know you were scared. But every time they said I misunderstood, I would wonder whether you believed them a little. I do not. I know that now. The last word mattered. Now. Not forever. Not completely. My choices were still evidence she was collecting. I moved the envelope away from her. I will not sign. Willa stood and picked up her backpack. At the doorway, she stopped. Do not tell Graham you refused because I told you to. I won't. I do not want him saying I cost you the money. He will probably say that anyway. Then tell the truth. What truth? That you refused because he asked you to lie. I watched her walk upstairs. The next morning, I wrote my response with my attorney. It was 4 sentences long. I will not sign any statement describing the entrance incident as consensual, affectionate, or misunderstood. Willa did not agree to wear the sign, and I did not authorize her participation in the filmed segment. Any financial support conditioned on changing those facts is declined. Do not send revised offers containing the same condition. I did not accuse Graham of bribery. I did not demand a larger amount. I did not threaten to release the video. I sent the response through my attorney and returned to work. Graham replied before noon. You are choosing pride over your daughter's future. I read the sentence once. Then I saved it with the other messages. He had made the same argument 25 years earlier. Wear the sign, because Celeste's opportunity matters. Smile, because the family's reputation matters. Stay quiet, because conflict will damage everyone's future. The person being humiliated was always blamed for whatever honesty might cost. This time, I did not answer. 2 days later, Dana requested a video conference with Willa and me. My attorney attended. Dana explained that the Ashbridge House review had reached the point where investigators needed to confirm what happened at the entrance. We have written records, she said. We have staff interviews. The footage would help establish the sequence and the exact language used. Willa sat beside me at the kitchen table. Who would watch it? She asked. Me, the general manager, one member of the employment committee, and outside counsel if necessary. Would Aunt Celeste get a copy? She may be shown relevant portions as part of responding to the allegations. She would not receive an unrestricted file. Would my face be in the report? The broadly distributed employment decision would not include your photograph. We can refer to you as a minor guest rather than use your full name. Would anyone take screenshots? We can prohibit screenshots and keep the footage inside a secure review system. I cannot promise what someone might remember, but I can control the official record. Willa looked at me. What happens if I say no? Dana answered before I could. The review continues using other evidence. Refusing will not be treated as proof that the event did not happen. Would it make it harder? It might make the exact sequence more disputed. Willa folded her arms. I do not want the whole wedding video shown. We need only the entrance footage and the brief transition to the old tape. No part where people are looking at me afterward. The official footage ends when you leave the entrance. What about the live stream? That is a separate record. We are not requesting it. Willa considered this for nearly a minute. You can use the entrance part, she said. Only the people you named. No public release. No screenshots and documents. Do not put my full name in anything people at the club do not need to see. Dana wrote down each condition. I can honor those restrictions. Willa turned to me. You have to sign, right? Yes, because I am your legal parent. But you are signing what I chose. Yes. She looked back at Dana. Then I agree. My attorney prepared a limited authorization. It named the specific clip, the specific purpose, the people allowed to review it, and the restrictions on copying and distribution. I signed beneath Willa's conditions. It was the first document connected to the wedding that used my authority to protect her choice instead of erase it. After the call, Willa remained at the table. Does saying yes mean I am helping Aunt Celeste get fired? No. But the video could be part of it. Yes. Then how is that different? You are allowing the club to see what its employee did with its systems. The club decides the consequence. What if I feel bad later? You might. Does that mean I made the wrong choice? No. You can feel bad about a consequence and still know you told the truth. She picked at a small scratch in the table. What if they say I wanted revenge? They will probably say many things. Do you want revenge? I thought about Celeste losing the ceremony, Graham losing control of the story, Judith being forced to hear her own voice on the tape. Part of me wanted them to feel ashamed. I could not pretend otherwise. I want consequences, I said. Sometimes that feels close to revenge. The difference is that I am not asking anyone to invent a punishment. I am asking them to look at what happened and make their own decision. Willa nodded. That sounds like something you had to think about. It is the best one I have. Lena contacted me later that week. Her company had completed its internal review and was ready to provide the production brief and version log to Dana under the restricted process. Before the files were sent, Lena asked whether she could explain one more failure directly to me. We relied on Judith's statement that you consented, she said. Our contract required a signed release from a parent or legal guardian. We did not have one. I know. We treated the bride's family as if they could speak for you. Yes, the assistant editor checked whether the clip length matched the placeholder. She did not check whether the child in the clip had agreed to be used. She was visibly refusing. Yes. Why didn't anyone stop? Because each person believed another person had already verified consent. The camera operator believed the floor producer knew. The floor producer believed the production brief was accurate. The editor believed the marked take had been approved. I believed my team had followed the contract. And Celeste believed no one would question her. Lena paused. Yes. The version log showed the exact sequence. The old 2001 footage had been restored and placed in the program before the wedding. The entrance clip was inserted after Celeste sent the instruction to use the take. The playback cue was locked 19 minutes later. There was no mysterious edit, no unknown saboteur, no accidental discovery at the last second. The system had done exactly what Celeste ordered it to do. Lena also sent a copy of the wedding morning production schedule. One name appeared beside the family entrance segment. Marisol Vega. What does Marisol have to do with this? I asked. She was listed as the bridal party contact who confirmed the schedule before filming began. Did she see the sign? I do not know. Did she approve the brief? She confirmed that the family entrance segment would happen as planned. I remembered Marisol standing several steps behind Celeste at the entrance. She had not spoken. She had watched Willa refuse. She had watched us leave. Until that moment, I had thought of her only as one more person who chose silence. That evening, my phone displayed a message from an unfamiliar number. My first instinct was to ignore it. Then the sender identified herself. This is Marisol Vega. I need to tell you what Celeste said before the wedding. She is asking me to support a timeline that is not true. I forwarded the message to my attorney before replying. My attorney advised me not to meet alone and not to promise confidentiality. I wrote back that Marisol could speak through counsel or provide a written account. Her response came a minute later. I will give the same information to Dana. I should have spoken sooner. A second message followed. The sign was not Plan A. It was the part Celeste thought would make you leave quietly. Marisol's message stayed on my screen. I read it 3 times before forwarding it to my attorney. Until then, I had believed the sign was the plan from the beginning. Graham had ordered it. Judith had arranged the ribbon. Celeste had approved the filmed entrance segment. If the sign was not Plan A, then my family had considered more than one way to remove Willa from the wedding. My attorney arranged for Marisol to give a recorded statement 2 days later. Dana would interview her separately for the club review. My attorney and I were allowed to ask about facts involving Willa and the wedding, but Dana made clear that her employment process would remain independent. Marisol joined the video call from a small office. She wore no makeup, and her hair was pulled into a loose knot. She looked nothing like the woman who had stood behind Celeste in a bridesmaid dress while my daughter was blocked at the entrance. She began before anyone asked a question. "I should have said something before the wedding." My attorney replied, "Please start with what you knew." Marisol nodded. About a month before the wedding, Celeste showed me the portrait schedule. Willa was not listed. I asked whether that was intentional. "What did Celeste say?" I asked. "She said Willa was not really part of the bridal family." My hands tightened beneath the table. "Did she use those words?" "Yes." "Did she mention the adoption?" "Not then. She said Audrey had made her own family choices and should not expect those choices to change the wedding photographs." Marisol looked at me through the screen. I knew that sounded ugly. I told myself it was a sister issue. The same excuse Adrian had used. The same excuse Lena's team had accepted in another form. A family issue. A private tradition. Words that made cruelty sound inaccessible to anyone outside the bloodline. Marisol continued. "The original plan was not the sign. Celeste wanted Willa's name removed from the final guest list. But the invitation named her," I said. "I know." Celeste thought the entrance staff could say there had been a printing error. "What would happen then?" "Staff were supposed to ask you and Willa to wait in a side room while someone checked with the bride." "For how long?" "Until after the principal family photographs." My attorney asked, "Was Willa supposed to be admitted afterward?" Marisol hesitated. "Celeste never said directly." "What did she expect me to do?" I asked. "She said you would probably leave." The answer should not have surprised me. It still did. "She wanted the venue to pretend my daughter's name had disappeared." "Yes. Then keep us waiting until we gave up." "Yes. Why did that plan change?" "Graham saw the printed invitation at the rehearsal dinner. He said you would not accept a list error because you always kept documents." That was true. My father knew I saved contracts, estimates, invitations, and receipts. He called it obsessive, when the records inconvenienced him, and responsible when he needed one. "What did he suggest?" I asked. "The old family joke." Marisol looked away from the camera. "He said the sign had worked on you before." My throat tightened. "Worked how?" "He said you hated public arguments. He said if Willa wore it, they would get the footage. If she refused, you would leave before anyone inside had to deal with you." My father had not merely remembered the old sign, he had remembered what it taught me. Endure or disappear, Marisol continued. "Judith said Willa might accept it if she believed it was a family tradition. That was when she asked for the measurement." "I think so." "And Celeste?" "She liked the idea because it made the exclusion look playful." I forced myself to keep my voice steady. "What exactly did she say?" Marisol inhaled. "She said, she either wears it and becomes the joke, or she refuses and leaves. Either way, she stays out of the portraits." The room became silent. There it was. Not an implication. Not a conclusion formed from several documents. A sentence. Two choices built around one outcome. My attorney asked Marisol when she heard it. 2 nights before the wedding, we were reviewing the entrance schedule in Celeste's suite. Who was present? Celeste, Graham, Judith, and me. Did anyone object? No. Did you? Marisol swallowed. No. Why not? I asked. She looked directly at me. Because I did not want to lose Celeste's friendship. Because several of my clients came through people she knew. Because I told myself Willa would be embarrassed for a minute, and then everyone would move on. Everyone except Willa. Yes. You stood at the entrance. Yes. You heard what Celeste said about adoption. Yes. Why did you still say nothing? Tears gathered in Marisol's eyes, but her voice remained clear. Because by then, saying something would have required admitting I knew before it happened. It was one of the first honest answers anyone had given me. She was not claiming confusion. She was not hiding behind tradition. She had protected herself. What changed now? I asked. Celeste called me after Dana requested an interview. She wanted me to say Graham surprised everyone with the sign on the wedding morning. Did she ask you to lie directly? She called it clarifying the timeline. Do you have the message? Yes. I sent it to Dana and my attorney. Why refuse now when you stayed silent before? Marisol looked down. Because she was going to put my name under a lie that made her innocent. I realized I had already protected her once, and she still expected me to take the risk when consequences arrived. Her decision was not heroic. It came late and partly from self-preservation. That did not make the information false. It made her human in a way I did not find comforting. My attorney asked several final questions about dates, locations, and who handled the production schedule. Marisol answered, without changing the essential sequence. The original plan was false exclusion through the guest list. Graham replaced it with a reenactment. Judith arranged the physical details and consent lie. Celeste approved the filming and desired outcome. 3 people had built different parts of the same trap. When the call ended, I sat alone at my kitchen table. Willa was still at school. I had an hour before she returned. I printed the transcript section containing Celeste's sentence, then placed it in the folder with the invitation, portrait plan, vendor record, and production brief. The folder had become heavier with each truth, but evidence was not the only thing growing. So was the distance between what I had believed about myself and what my choices had shown. I had called myself cautious. Willa had experienced me as hopeful at her expense. I had called my family difficult. They had used her invitation as bait. I had told myself I could always leave. They had counted on it. Willa came home shortly after 4. She dropped her backpack beside the bench, then noticed the folder. Did Marisol talk? Yes. Was she lying? I do not think so. Her account matches the records. Willa sat down. What was plan A? I told her. Her name would disappear from the guest list. We would be asked to wait in a side room. The photographs would continue without us. Celeste expected us to leave. Willa listened without interrupting. Why did they change it? Graham knew I had the printed invitation. He thought I would demand an explanation. So he used the sign because he knew you would not argue in front of people. Yes. She looked toward the workshop. They planned for you too. I know. The sign was for me, but leaving was your part. Yes. She sat quietly for a moment. What did Aunt Celeste say? I had considered softening the exact words. Then I remembered how often softening protected the wrong person. I repeated them. She either wears it and becomes the joke, or she refuses and leaves. Either way, she stays out of the portraits. Willa's face did not change immediately. Then she asked, Did Grandma hear that? Yes. Grandpa? Yes. And nobody said no. No. She folded her hands on the table. I want to say something for the investigation. You do not have to. I know. You can decide later. I already decided. What kind of statement? I do not want to sit in a room with them. You will not. I do not want a video. All right. I want them to hear my voice, but I do not want them looking at my face while I talk. Dana had offered 3 options. No statement. A written statement. Recorded audio. I can ask for audio, I said. Willa nodded. I want to write it myself. I can help with grammar if you ask. Not the words. Not the words. She went upstairs with a notebook. I did not follow. 20 minutes later, she came back and placed a page on the table. The first version was too long. She had tried to answer every lie. The second sounded like a letter to Judith. The third focused on the doorway. Willa read it aloud once, stopped, and crossed out 2 sentences. I sound like I am begging them to understand. You are allowed to tell them how it felt. I do not care if they understand. She started again. This time, the statement was shorter. You gave me 2 choices. I could wear the sign and be your joke, or refuse it and become the reason we left. That is not an invitation. You were not embarrassed because I came from the country. You were embarrassed because I came as my mother's daughter. She looked at me. Does that sound like me? Yes. Does it sound too adult? No. It sounds like something you learned because adults forced you to learn it. She kept the page. Dana arranged for the audio to be recorded through a secure system. Willa chose to record at home with me nearby but outside the room. Before she began, she asked, "Can I stop if I change my mind?" Yes. Even in the middle? Yes. What if I record it and decide no one can use it? Then no one uses it. She closed the door. I waited in the hallway. The first attempt lasted 20 seconds before she stopped. The second ended after she stumbled over the word invitation. On the third attempt, she read the entire statement. When she opened the door, her face was pale. I am done. You do not have to listen to it. I do not want to. I submitted the authorization according to her instructions. That evening, I apologized to her. Not the quick apology I had offered after the wedding. Not the apology designed to make the room feel better. We sat at the kitchen table with no documents between us. I need to say this without explaining it away, I began. Willa waited. I knew Graham could humiliate people when he felt embarrassed. I knew Judith used guilt to make everyone cooperate. I knew Celeste had treated you as if you were outside the family before the wedding. Willa looked down at her hands. I separated each warning from the others because I wanted to believe I could manage them. She did not respond. I kept asking you to tolerate them because I had survived them. I was wrong to treat my survival as proof that you were safe. Her eyes lifted. I continued. You do not have to forgive me now. You do not have to reassure me. I am not asking you to trust a promise. You can watch what I do next. Willa looked toward the dark window. I believe you are sorry. Thank you. That does not mean I know it will last. I understand. People change when everyone is watching. Yes. What happens when no one cares about the wedding anymore? That is the part I have to prove. She nodded. It was not forgiveness. It was a condition I had earned. 2 days later, Adrian called my attorney and requested permission to receive a limited factual packet. He had already received Marisol's signed account from her attorney and production records from Celeste's attorney as part of their dispute over wedding expenses. Willa agreed that my attorney could share only the invitation, portrait schedule, and the sentence showing Celeste expected us to leave. No video, no audio statement, no unnecessary details. Adrian called me after reviewing them. I ended the engagement, he said. I stood alone in the workshop office. Why are you telling me? Because Celeste is still telling relatives the wedding will be rescheduled. That is between you and her. I know. I wanted you to hear the decision from me before someone used it to pressure you. I said nothing, he continued. I could have believed she made one terrible decision. I cannot believe that after she lied about the photographs, lied about your consent, ordered the clip used, and then blamed Willa. You do not need my approval. I am not asking for it. Are you asking me to say you did the right thing? No. His answer sounded honest. Then, I am sorry you had to learn who she was this way, I said. I had other chances. That was true. After we hung up, I did not tell Willa immediately. Adrian's decision was not a prize she had won. When she came home, I gave her the fact without celebration. Adrian ended the engagement, Willa put down her backpack. Because of the video? Because of the plan, the lies afterward, and the way Celeste kept blaming you. Is Aunt Celeste going to say it is my fault? Probably. Is it? No. Even if none of this happened, they would be married. If none of this happened, that would mean Celeste had made different choices. Willa considered that. So the wedding did not end because I refused. No, it ended because of what they required you to accept. The club review continued through separate interviews. Dana did not tell me what Celeste said. She confirmed only that the employment committee was completing its findings. Then, at the beginning of the 8th week, my attorney received a request from Celeste's attorney. It proposed a private settlement conference after Ashbridge House issued its employment decision. The listed participants were Celeste, Graham, Judith, Adrian, me, and our attorneys. The stated purpose was to address the false public statement, ownership and official use of the wedding footage, return of event property, and future contact boundaries. I read the request twice. For weeks, my family had spoken through documents, relatives, money, and other people's systems. Now they wanted one room. I agreed on one condition. Willa would not enter it. Dana called 3 days before the settlement conference. I was alone in the workshop office, reviewing payroll, when her name appeared on my phone. For a moment, I expected another request for documents. Instead, she said the Ashbridge House review was complete. The general manager and employment committee issued their decision this morning. I closed the spreadsheet. What happens now? Celeste Rowan's employment has been terminated. The sentence brought no rush of satisfaction. I looked through the office window at Willa, sanding the edge of a drawer with one of my employees. Her hair was tied back, and sawdust covered the front of her apron. Why? I asked. Dana answered carefully. The findings involved misuse of the guest management system, improper direction of staff during a private event, use of an approved vendor account for the sign, false representation concerning consent for a minor, and dishonesty during the internal review. Dana could not discuss Celeste's full interview, but she confirmed that the employment committee had used only the restricted entrance footage. Willa's audio statement was not part of the employment decision. The general notice would identify her only as a minor guest, without her photograph or personal details. Staff would be told that Celeste was no longer employed, and that guest systems, vendor accounts, and staff authority could not be used for private humiliation. That separation mattered. The club had not judged whether Celeste was a good sister. It had judged what she did with its systems. After the call, I went into the workshop. Willa was testing whether the drawer slid smoothly inside an old cabinet. Dana called, I said. She looked up. What happened? The club fired Celeste. Willa pulled the drawer out again. Because of the video? Because she used the guest system, staff, and vendor account to carry out the plan. She also lied during the review. Did they use my statement? No. Her shoulders lowered slightly. Are you glad? I considered the question. I am relieved the club did not pretend nothing happened. That is not the same as glad. No. She ran one finger along the drawer edge. Do you feel sorry for her? I feel sorry that she kept choosing the things that brought her here. Willa nodded. That sounds fair. The settlement conference took place the following Monday in a neutral law office outside Pittsburgh. It was separate from Ashbridge House, whose review had already ended. The meeting concerned the false public statement, official footage, the physical sign, the messages sent to Willa, and future contact. It was not an HR hearing or a demand that anyone reconcile. My attorney sat beside me. Celeste had counsel, while Graham and Judith shared another lawyer. Adrian attended because Celeste had asked him to confirm that she never planned to exclude Willa. Graham sat straight-backed in navy. Judith folded a tissue between her hands. Celeste wore pale gray and had arranged her hair with the same care she brought to every professional photograph. No one looked ruined. They looked prepared. The attorneys explained that the meeting was voluntary and confidential. I was not there to persuade them to love Willa or to perform an apology. I was there because silence had allowed my family to manufacture too many versions of my consent. Celeste spoke first. I want it recorded that I did not know Dad had ordered that sign. Her attorney glanced toward her. My attorney opened the document folder. You approved the family entrance segment, I told Celeste. She said she had approved a tradition, not the specific sign. I reminded her that the production brief named the sign and that she ordered the team to use the entrance take after we left. Celeste turned toward Adrian. They told me Audrey was creating another scene. I thought the clip would show the truth. It did, I said. She accused me of wanting the footage spread. My attorney placed my restricted use authorization on the table. It prohibited public release, promotional use, and broadly circulated screenshots. Celeste then claimed I had sent the video to Adrian. He answered that he had received records from the attorneys and Marisol, not the footage from me. Celeste's attorney redirected the discussion to the proposed public statement. My attorney stated that I would not sign anything calling the sign consensual, affectionate, or misunderstood. Celeste leaned forward. You have already destroyed my reputation. No, I said. I refused to repair it with a lie. Graham cleared his throat. This is getting nowhere. My attorney turned toward him. Then let us discuss the sign order. Graham folded his arms and called the sign spontaneous. My attorney placed the September 19th vendor invoice on the table with his email and the still image from the 2001 tape. He changed his claim. The sign may have been ordered earlier, he said, but the decision to use it at the entrance had been spontaneous. When my attorney pointed to the guest instruction entered before the wedding, he blamed Celeste's system. Celeste pointed toward Judith's consent statement. Their alliance began to split. Graham returned to the word joke and claimed I had laughed in 2001. My attorney played only the relevant seconds of the restricted footage. 15-year-old me stood beneath the sign, while Judith's recorded voice ordered me to smile, so people would not think the family was cruel. That was still a smile, Graham said. You ordered one. He said I had survived and accused me of making everything dramatic. I reminded him that the plan depended on knowing I would leave quietly once Willa refused. She understood the tradition, I said. One girl is humiliated so another person can feel important. That is not what it meant. It is what it did. Judith began crying before anyone addressed her. She pressed the tissue beneath one eye. Judith began crying before anyone addressed her. I never intended for Willa to feel lesser. My attorney placed her production note beside the vendor record. It stated that Willa's invitation did not place her in the blood family portrait group, and that Audrey had agreed to the tradition. Judith blamed Celeste's wording. Celeste said Judith had written it. Graham said both women had taken a simple joke too far. Their defenses no longer matched. You also wrote that I agreed, I said. I thought you would. You thought my consent could be added later. Judith said she had wanted Willa to feel included. I asked why inclusion required a sign, and why their shared family memory always required the girl connected to me to carry the shame. She opened her mouth, but no answer came. My attorney asked whether the parties were ready to hear Willa's statement. Celeste immediately shook her head. She is a child. Audrey wrote whatever she is about to play. I did not, I said. Then you coached her. She chose every word. Graham looked toward the door. Why is she not here? Because she does not have to sit in a room with you to be believed. Judith pressed the tissue against her mouth. I would never hurt her. You called from an unknown number after being told not to contact her. I wanted to explain. She told you to stop. I am her grandmother. That is not permission. I placed my phone on the table. Willa had authorized me to play the recording once in this meeting. No copies would be distributed. I pressed the screen. Her voice filled the room. You gave me two choices. I could wear the sign and be your joke, or refuse it and become the reason we left. That is not an invitation. You were not embarrassed because I came from the country. You were embarrassed because I came as my mother's daughter." The recording ended. No one spoke. I reached for the phone, but Celeste laughed once. It was a sharp, empty sound. She sounds exactly like Audrey. I looked at her. She is my daughter. That is the problem. Adrian turned toward her. Celeste seemed to realize what she had said. She tried to correct it. I mean, Audrey has filled her head with the same resentment. "No," Adrian said. "You said being Audrey's daughter was the problem. That is not what I meant." "What did you mean?" Celeste looked around the table as if someone might supply better words. Then she said the ones that had been waiting beneath every explanation. "People at Ashbridge House would have asked why Audrey brought that kind of child into the principal portraits," Celeste said. "Willa did not know those guests. She did not fit the event." Adrian's voice stayed quiet. "What kind of child?" Celeste looked at him. "You know what I mean." When he refused to let the phrase pass, she referred to Willa's foster care past, her lack of connection to the guests, and the way she would make the portraits feel provincial. Willa had chosen the brown shoes because she would rather look country than uncomfortable. Celeste had noticed them before she noticed the ring box. She did not need a longer speech. The prejudice was plain. Adrian stood. "The engagement will not resume." Celeste reminded him that he had already ended it privately, and he said he was making the decision clear because she continued telling relatives the wedding was merely postponed. "You did not lose the wedding because Willa refused the sign," he said. "You lost me because you still believe she should have worn it." He gathered his documents and left without looking at me. I felt no victory. A 5-year relationship had ended because one person finally stopped renaming contempt. Celeste stared at the empty chair. Then she looked at me. "You wanted that." "I wanted my daughter protected. You always hated that I had more than you. I wanted you to have a wedding. I brought you a daughter who had restored a ring box as a gift." Celeste's expression flickered. "What ring box?" The question answered more than any accusation could. She had never asked what Willa carried. She had only noticed what she wore. Graham pushed his chair back. "This family has wasted enough time on one joke." I turned toward him. "You still think the joke is the problem." It was 30 seconds. It began before the wedding and continued for 8 weeks. "Because you refused to let it go. Because none of you told the truth." He struck the table with the flat of his hand. "We did the same thing to you, and you turned out fine." The room went silent again. I looked at my father. For years I had measured my life against that sentence. I had a home. I had a business. I had raised Willa. I could enter a room without lowering my eyes. Graham saw those things and believed he deserved credit for every scar I learned to hide. "No," I said. "I learned how to survive it. Then I mistook surviving you for proof that it was safe to bring my daughter back." His face hardened. "You are cutting off your own parents over a sign," Graham said. "I am ending access because you plan to humiliate my child, lied about my consent, offered money for my silence, and still believe her refusal was the offense." Judith reached across the table, but I moved my hand before she touched it. "Are you saying we will never see her again?" "I am saying there will be no contact now." She asked how long it would last, and what they had to do. "This is not a checklist that buys access," I said. "You can apologize because it is true, not because you expect a reward." When Judith said I was taking away their granddaughter, I answered, "Willa was never yours to rank or reclaim." Graham said I could not control every relative, gift, or message. "No," I said. "But I can control who reaches my daughter, and I can end contact with anyone who carries messages for you." My attorney placed the written contact acknowledgement on the table. It prohibited direct or indirect contact with Willa, calls from unknown numbers, school visits, messages through relatives, gifts or packages without my written permission, and public use of her name or image. It also confirmed that no statement could claim I had consented. The footage would remain restricted, and the sign would stay stored until the evidence preservation period ended. Their attorneys explained that the document recorded permitted contact rather than functioning as a court order. Celeste refused at first, then signed. Graham read every line twice. Judith signed while crying. Their signatures did not create the boundary. My decision did. I stood and placed Willa's phone recording back in my purse. Judith said my name. I did not stop. Audrey, please do not leave like this. I turned at the door. How would you prefer I leave? As your daughter. I am leaving as Willa's mother. I opened the door. Behind me, Graham began telling the lawyers the meeting had been unfair. Judith asked whether Easter counted as a special circumstance. Celeste demanded to know who would correct the relatives who thought she had been fired because of a family argument. I walked into the hallway without waiting for them to agree that I had the right to go. For the first few days after the settlement conference, nothing felt settled. Celeste had lost her job. Adrian had ended the engagement. Graham and Judith had signed the contact agreement. The official wedding footage was restricted, and no public statement could claim that I had approved the sign. Those were facts. They did not make the house quieter. Relatives continued calling. Some asked what Celeste had done. Others already had an answer, and only wanted me to admit that the consequences had gone too far. My Aunt Deborah left a message saying Celeste had lost her wedding, career, and future because of one family disagreement. I did not call her back. A cousin sent me a screenshot of a private group message, in which Celeste said I had manipulated a child into destroying her life. I saved it with the other records, then deleted it from my phone. There was no celebration. No crowd arrived at my workshop to congratulate me. No one offered to replace the Bellwether Inn project because I had stood up to my family. Most people returned to their own lives. That was almost a relief. For weeks, Willa and I had lived inside other people's reactions. Every call, email, and document asked us to explain what happened. When the attention faded, the real work remained. The Bellwether Inn owner called on a cold Monday morning. He had awarded the restoration project to another company. I wanted you to hear it directly from me, he said. I expected this. The decision was not about the quality of your work. It was about the attention. He paused. The donors wanted stability. My daughter was humiliated at a wedding. I understand. No, you understand that some donors were uncomfortable. He did not argue. The letter of intent had never become a final contract. He had the right to choose another company. That did not make the loss smaller. I thanked him for calling and ended the conversation. Then I opened the business accounts. The project would have produced approximately $19,000 in profit. Without it, the winter schedule had gaps. I called my 3 employees into the office. I told them the truth without making Willa the reason for our financial problem. The inn project has been awarded elsewhere. We still have enough work to continue, but I am adjusting the schedule and delaying some equipment purchases. One employee asked whether anyone would lose hours. Not right now. I reduced my own salary first. The workshop heating upgrade moved to the following year. I postponed replacing the older work van. We accepted smaller restoration jobs that required more travel and produced less profit. One involved repairing the staircase of a farmhouse 30 miles outside Belmere. Another involved restoring 4 porch columns for a public library. The work was not glamorous, but it was real. By January, our accounts were stable enough that I could stop calculating payroll every night before bed. No secret investor appeared. No wealthy stranger rescued the business after hearing our story. We survived by spending carefully, accepting smaller jobs, and doing good work. I never told Willa how much easier Graham's money would have made those months. She knew enough. Sometimes she came into my office while I reviewed invoices and asked whether we were all right. I always answered honestly. We are tighter than I would like, but we are safe. She never offered to give up therapy. I never asked. Graham's offer had tried to make her care conditional on my silence. Refusing it meant therapy remained an expense I chose, because she needed it, not a debt she owed. Judith began sending letters 2 weeks after the meeting. The first arrived in a cream envelope with Willa's name written across the front. I placed it on the kitchen table without opening it. A letter came from Judith, I said, when Willa returned from school. She looked at the envelope. Did you read it? No. Do you want to? It is addressed to you. She sat down but did not touch it. What do you think it says? I do not know. Probably that she is sorry. Maybe. Do you believe her? I have not heard an apology that does not ask for access. Willa studied the handwriting. Can we send it back? Yes. Unopened? Yes. I wrote return to sender on the front. Willa carried it to the mailbox herself. A second letter arrived the following week. Then a birthday card. Then a small padded envelope with no return name. The postal mark came from Judith's town. I told Willa each time. She asked that everything be returned unopened. Graham sent nothing. His silence did not feel like respect. It felt like punishment. He had always believed withdrawal would make people come back and ask what they had done wrong. I did not ask. Celeste contacted neither of us directly. She honored the written boundary, although relatives continued repeating her version. According to Celeste, I had wanted her life because mine was ordinary. She said I used Willa's adoption to create public sympathy. She said Adrian had been looking for a reason to leave. She said Ashbridge House had fired her to avoid bad publicity. Each version made her the person acted upon. None included the guest system instruction, vendor order, false consent statement, or her own words at the entrance. I stopped correcting every relative. The records existed. The people who wanted the truth could ask. The people who wanted comfort would choose whichever story allowed them to avoid changing their opinion of Celeste. Willa noticed when I stopped answering. Does it bother you that they believe her? She asked one evening. Yes. Then why do you not tell them everything? Because explaining the truth to someone who wants it is different from defending it to someone who has already refused it. She considered that. Would you show them the video? No. Even if it proved you were right? Your face is not something I get to trade for agreement. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she returned to the small wooden frame she was sanding. Therapy became harder before it became useful. Willa liked the therapist but disliked being asked how she felt. She preferred facts. She could describe the sign, the ribbon, the camera, and Celeste's words. She struggled when the therapist asked what she feared would happen after we left. During one session in February, the therapist invited me into the room. Willa sat at one end of the couch with her arms folded. I want to tell you something, she said. All right. At the entrance, when I said I could wait outside, I thought you might say yes. The answer cut through me. I know. You said no immediately. Yes. But before you did, I thought there was a chance you would go in alone. I wanted to tell her that I never would have done that. The therapist remained silent. So did Willa. I understood that the truthful answer was more complicated. I did not go in, I said. But you had reasons to wonder whether I might. Willa looked down. You always told me we could leave if your family became uncomfortable. Yes, you did not say they would have to leave us alone. No, you kept trying to keep both. I did. Them and me. Yes. She looked at me again. Would you choose differently now if there were no camera? Yes. If nobody found out? Yes. If Grandma cried? Yes. If you lost another project? The answer did not come as quickly. Willa noticed. I let the silence remain rather than covering it with a promise. I would still choose you, I said. I might be frightened. I might hate the cost. But I would not ask you to become smaller, to make the cost easier. She studied my face. I believe that more than if you said it would be easy. It would not always be easy. What if I still do not trust it? Then I keep proving it. For how long? As long as it takes. The therapist asked Willa what proof would look like. Willa said, not asking me to go back because time passed. That became the test. The sign remained at Ashbridge House, while the investigation and settlement documents were completed. It legally belonged to Celeste because she had reimbursed the vendor charge through her wedding invoice. During the settlement conference, her attorney asked what she wanted done with it. Celeste stared at the white-painted wooden sign as if it had betrayed her. I do not want it. Her attorney had her sign a written abandonment of the item. The club kept it until the evidence preservation period ended. In March, Dana contacted my attorney and said the sign could be transferred to me. I did not want it in the house. I also did not want someone at the club throwing it away without Willa knowing. I told her the choice belonged to Willa. We can leave it there for disposal, I said. We can have it destroyed. We can collect it. You never have to see it. Willa sat at the kitchen table, turning a pencil between her fingers. What do you want? I want it to stop having power. That is not an option. She was right. The board had no power by itself. The meaning came from what people had done with it. I do not want it displayed, I said. Neither do I. I do not want to burn it and make a ceremony. No, I do not want anyone filming what happens to it. Definitely no. She thought for several seconds. Bring it to the workshop. Are you sure? Yes. When the sign arrived, it was wrapped in brown paper. I placed it on a workbench and waited for Willa to open it. The lettering looked less impressive beneath fluorescent workshop lights. Country Bumpkin. The cream ribbon still hung through the holes. Willa removed the ribbon first. She dropped it into the trash. Then she ran one hand across the painted letters. Grandpa ordered this because he thought it would make us leave. Yes. Aunt Celeste thought it would keep me out of the picture. Yes. Grandma measured me for it. Yes. Willa looked toward the shelves of repaired wood. People keep saying we should turn bad things into something meaningful. They do. I do not want this to become a plaque about courage. All right. I do not want to make it into a frame. All right. I do not want to donate it to someone so they can tell my story. All right. She picked up a sanding block. I want it to become ordinary wood. We worked without speaking. The black letters faded beneath the sandpaper. Country disappeared first. Bumpkin took longer because the paint was thicker near the center. Willa stopped twice to rest her hand. I did not take over. When no lettering remained, we ran the board through the table saw. We cut it into narrow blocks, used for spacing pieces of wood during glue-ups and cabinet assembly. No one watched. No camera recorded us. The pieces went into a plastic bin beside dozens of other workshop spacers. A week later, I saw Willa use one while repairing a drawer. She did not mention where it came from. That was the point. 6 months after the wedding, Rebecca invited us to an Easter gathering at her home. Her message was honest. She said Graham and Judith might attend because several older relatives wanted everyone together. She also said she would understand if we declined. I showed Willa the invitation. You do not have to decide now, I said. Are they definitely going? Rebecca does not know. What do you want to do? I want to hear what you feel safe doing. She waited, and I corrected myself. I smiled slightly. She had not stopped holding me to honest answers. I would like to see Rebecca, I said. I do not want to be in a room with Graham or Judith. Could we go and leave if they show up? We could. That is what you used to say. The words were not cruel. They were accurate. I nodded. You are right. Willa looked at the invitation again. I do not want to go. Then we will not. You do not need to think about it? No. What will you tell Rebecca? That we appreciate the invitation but cannot attend. Will you tell her why? Only if she asks. Will you say I made the decision? No. I will say we decided. Willa watched me send the message. Rebecca replied that she understood and hoped to see us another time. There was no argument. No one arrived at our house. The world did not collapse because we declined a family gathering. That evening, Willa and I ate dinner in the workshop office because we were finishing a set of library shelves. She used one of the plain wooden spacers beneath a shelf while checking the alignment. I recognized the small dark mark along one edge, where the cream ribbon had once passed through the sign. Willa noticed me looking. "It does not say anything now," she said. "No. It does not get to tell anyone who they are." She adjusted the spacer and checked the level again. The shelf was straight. I leaned against the workbench. "Do you feel at home here?" She did not answer immediately. She removed the spacer and returned it to the plastic bin with all the others. Then she looked at me. "I don't have to prove it here." I had spent years believing family was a door I was obligated to keep reopening. Willa taught me that home begins where no one asks you to become smaller before they let you in.